I live with my mom in a cozy cabin nestled on about 50 acres of sprawling fields and dense woods. It's a peaceful spot, perfect for unwinding, and today we've been enjoying a lazy day, lounging around and glued to the television. But duty called, and I had to head out to mow my grandmother's yard that afternoon. I glanced at my mom, sprawled comfortably on the couch, and said, "Well, I guess it's cooler outside now. Probably a good time to get off my ass and go mow." She smirked and replied, "Well, you could just call her and say you'll do it tomorrow." I shook my head, already mentally preparing. Nah, I'm gonna grab my stuff and head out. So I gathered my things, hopped into my truck, and started down the driveway. As I crested the hill, my jaw dropped. There, in the middle of our field, about 70 feet from where I parked, were at least 20 Mississippi Highway Patrol cars, their lights casting an eerie glow across the grass. My first thought was that our neighbor, who's got a reputation for getting into all sorts of trouble, must have really messed up this time. Probably something to do with drugs or worse. I shook my head, trying to process the scene. As I pulled up the gate to leave, I spotted one of the local cops, someone I recognized from around town. I rolled down my window and called out, "Hey, I'm the landowner here. Is everything all right?" He gave me a cryptic look and said, "It's gonna be," which didn't exactly clarify things, but left me with a sinking feeling in my gut. I nodded, unsure what to make of it, and drove off toward my grandmother's house, which was just a couple miles down the road. On the way, I pulled out my phone and called my mom. "Hey, I don't know how else to put this, but there are like 100 cops in our field right now," I said, my voice a mix of disbelief and urgency. She didn't hesitate. "I'm heading out there to check it out," she replied, her tone sharp with concern. I tried calling her back a few times as I drove, but she didn't pick up. I figured she was probably talking to the officers or scoping out the situation. With all those cops around, I knew she'd be safe. So I pushed the worry aside and focused on getting to my grandmother's place to start mowing. I pulled into her driveway, grabbed the mower, and got to work, the rhythmic hum of the engine drowning out my lingering unease. The yard was big, but I was making steady progress. About halfway through, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "The troopers wouldn't say much," she told me, her voice tense but controlled. "But one of the local cops we know said this guy was wanted in Texas for shooting 3 people. Killed 2, injured 1. He drove into our field, and when the troopers surrounded him, he shot himself." I stopped pushing the mower for a second, letting her words sink in. "Damn," I muttered, trying to wrap my head around the fact that something so violent had happened right on our land. I finished mowing, my mind racing with images of the scene I hadn't yet seen, and then headed back home to pick up my mom. Together, we drove back to the field to talk to the last few troopers still lingering at the scene. I approached one of them, a tall officer with a clipboard, and said, "I'm the property owner. Is everything clear now? Is it safe?" He nodded, his face weary but professional. "Yeah, we just moved the body and towed the car out. It's all clear now." I exhaled, still processing the weight of it all. "Wow, all the way from Texas, huh?" I said almost to myself. "Well, be safe, and thanks for handling it." The trooper gave a curt nod, and they began packing up to leave. After the last patrol car pulled away, my mom and I drove over to the spot in the field where it all went down, right near the old oak tree we used to climb as kids. The ground was a mess. Deep tire treads crisscrossed the grass, and there, stark against the green, was a large, dark stain of blood. We just stood there, staring, the reality of it hitting us like a freight train. A man had ended his life right here, on our land, after fleeing across state lines. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie. We headed back to the cabin, still shaken, and turned on the TV to catch the local news. A press conference was airing, confirming what the local cop had told my mom. A fugitive from Texas, wanted for a double murder and attempted murder, had taken his own life in our field after a standoff with law enforcement. As I sat there, Typing this out, it hit me that the guy had shot himself just as I was driving up the hill earlier. I hadn't heard the gunshot or the sirens, probably because I had the radio cranked up loud, oblivious of the chaos unfolding so close by. The weight of it all settled over me, a mix of shock, relief, and a lingering unease that something so dark had touched our quiet corner of the world. About 5 years ago, I was living in a charming two-story, two-bedroom house in England with my toddler son and our 3 cats. It was a cozy setup, just the 4 of us, and life had a quiet rhythm to it. One evening, after I'd tucked my son into bed, I settled onto the sofa in the living room, curling up with a good book. The house was still, save for the occasional creak of the old floorboards, and the cats were upstairs, likely sprawled across my bed, snoozing away. As I was reading, my phone buzzed on the arm of the sofa. It was a text from my mom, probably checking in or sharing some small update. I glanced at it, typed a quick reply, and set the phone back down on the armrest, right within reach. I sank back into my book, the story pulling me in when my phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. I replied, set the phone down again in the exact same spot, and resumed reading, half expecting another message to come through any second. The armrest was right beside me, so I didn't bother moving the phone elsewhere. It was perfectly convenient where it was. A few minutes passed, and I realized I hadn't heard the phone go off again. Curious if Mom had texted back, I reached over to grab it, but my hand met nothing but the smooth fabric of the armrest. I frowned, puzzled, and looked down. The phone wasn't there. Thinking I might have accidentally knocked it off, I leaned over to check the floor beside the sofa. Nothing. I patted around the cushions on either side of me, even lifted myself slightly to see if it had slipped beneath me. Still nothing. My confusion started to edge into irritation. I figured the phone must have somehow slid between the cushions, which meant I'd have to get up and start pulling the sofa apart. With a sigh, I stood and removed all the cushions, checking every crevice. No phone. Growing more annoyed, I heaved the entire sofa forward, thinking it might have fallen behind it. I crouched down, peering into the dusty space where the sofa had been, but there was no sign of it there either. By now, my frustration was bubbling into that irrational, hot-headed annoyance you get when something small but inexplicable goes wrong, like stubbing your toe or misplacing your keys. I huffed, muttering to myself about how ridiculous this was, and decided I'd grab the house phone from the kitchen to call my mobile and see if I could hear it ringing somewhere in the depths of the sofa. I started walking toward the kitchen, my mind still fixated on the missing phone. The kitchen was about 20 feet away, through the living room, past the dining room, and around a couple corners. You had to cross the length of the living room, turn right into the dining room, and then step into the kitchen. It wasn't a straight shot by any means. When I reached the kitchen, I froze in my tracks. There, lying neatly face up in the absolute center of the kitchen floor, was my phone. I stood there, staring at it, my brain struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. There was no way, no possible way, it could have gotten there from where I had been sitting. I hadn't walked to the kitchen since I'd started reading. I couldn't have dropped it, and even if I had, it wouldn't have landed so perfectly in the middle of the floor, around 2 corners, and through multiple rooms. Throwing it wouldn't have worked either. The angles and distance made it impossible. I just stood there dumbfounded for what felt like a full minute, my eyes locked on the phone as if it might vanish again if I looked away. A chill crept up my spine, not quite fear, but a deep, unsettling disbelief. How had it gotten there? I hadn't heard it fall, hadn't felt it slip, hadn't done anything to explain this. Finally, I stepped forward, bent down, and picked it up, half expecting something to feel off about it. But it was just my phone, normal as ever, with Mom's last text still glowing on the screen. I shook my head, tried to laugh it off, but the unease lingered, a quiet whisper that something about this moment wasn't right. When I was 15 years old, I had an encounter with something I now believe was a skinwalker, though back then, I didn't have a name for it. It wasn't until years later, when I learned about these entities, that the memory came rushing back in vivid, chilling detail. I was living in the tiny, almost non-existent town of Fordland, Missouri, in a house surrounded by thick woods and winding dirt roads. Our place was isolated, far from neighbors, and I loved it for that. The woods were my sanctuary, a place where I felt at peace, almost protected in a strange way. I knew every tree, every path, every clearing like the back of my hand, except for one patch of woods to the east, just beyond the edge of our property. That eastern stretch belonged to someone else, marked off by old, rusty barbed wire fences that were more suggestion than barrier. I'd hopped over them a few times to explore, but I never stayed long. The moment I stepped into those woods, an overwhelming, gut-wrenching unease would hit me, like the air itself was warning me to turn back. It wasn't just a feeling of being watched. It was deeper, like the place itself was wrong. My good friend Jay lived on the other side of those woods, and he'd explored them too, despite the same creepy vibe. One day at school, he told me about an abandoned camper he'd found while cutting through the woods toward my house. It sounded like the perfect spot for a secret hangout, so we made plans to sneak out that evening, meet at the camper, smoke some weed, and just chill. Our parents were strict, and neither of us had cell phones, so we came up with a plan. Jay would call my house phone at a specific time, let it ring once, and hang up. That single ring would be my signal to head out. It worked like a charm, keeping our parents none the wiser. That first night, I slipped out quietly, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves as I made my way along a narrow dirt path through the woods. The bright moonlight lit up the trail and the small clearing where the camper sat, casting long shadows but making the walk feel less daunting. That creepy feeling was still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind, but it wasn't overwhelming. When I reached the camper, Jay was already there, leaning against a rusted frame, looking relaxed. His presence chased away most of the unease, and we spent the evening smoking, poking around the old camper and talking. Everything went fine, so we decided to do it again the next night. The following evening, though, something felt off from the start. As I sat in my room, waiting for Jay's signal, a heavy, sinking dread settled in my stomach. I couldn't pinpoint why, but the thought of walking that path alone to the camper twisted my insides into knots. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just nerves, but the feeling clung to me like damp air. Then the phone rang once, sharp and quick, and I knew Jay was already heading out. I couldn't let him wait at the camper alone, so I pushed down the dread, grabbed my jacket, and slipped out the door. The night was pitch black, the moon completely hidden, leaving the woods shrouded in darkness. As I crossed over the barbed wire fence, every fiber of my being screamed to turn back. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches swaying in a vigorous breeze that rustled leaves and snapped twigs, making it sound like something was moving just out of sight. I stuck to one of the ruts in the dirt path, using it as a guide to keep from stumbling in the dark. My heart was already racing, and I hadn't even gone far. The clearing with the camper finally came into view, a faint outline in the blackness. But as I got closer, the uneasy feeling exploded into full-blown panic. My pulse thundered in my ears, my body on high alert, but I couldn't understand why. What was I so afraid of? Then, right beside me, from the thick darkness, came a sound I'll never forget. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard, unnatural, guttural, and terrifyingly close, coming from high up, as if whatever made it towered over me. I didn't dare look. My body reacted before my brain could catch up, and I spun around, sprinting back down the path like my life depended on it. The whole way, I was convinced I was going to die, that whatever was out there was right behind me, its presence heavy and oppressive. The wind picked up, whipping the branches into a frenzy, almost like the forest itself was urging me to escape. It sounds crazy, but in that moment, it felt like the trees were on my side, pushing me towards safety. I reached the fence, my lungs burning, and scrambled over it, one leg at a time, my hand shaking as I gripped the wire. For a brief second, Everything went silent. No wind, no rustling, just an eerie stillness. Then, from the trees across the path, I heard my name, Michelle, it called, in a voice that was unmistakably Jay's, calm and almost innocent. But I knew, with every ounce of my being, that it wasn't him. The tone was too perfect, too serene, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I froze, one leg still over the fence, my heart hammering. A few seconds later, the voice called again, closer this time, right where I'd been standing moments before, in that same unnervingly calm tone. That sealed it. Whatever was out there wasn't human. I bolted the rest of the way home, bursting through the door and collapsing onto my bedroom floor, my mind racing to make sense of what I'd heard. I replayed the sound, the voice, the feeling of being hunted, searching for any explanation that didn't sound insane. My biggest fear was that Jay was still out there, waiting at the camper, or worse, that something had happened to him. I barely slept that night, my thoughts spiraling between terror and guilt. The next morning at school, I spotted Jay right away, and relief washed over me. Before I could even apologize for ditching him, he beat me to it. "Sorry, man. I didn't make it to camper last night," he said, his eyes fixed on the ground, almost embarrassed. I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably, still avoiding my gaze. I was almost there when I heard this weird noise, so I turned back and went home. My stomach dropped. Like a roar, I blurted out. His eyes shot up to meet mine, wide with surprise and relief. "Yeah, exactly. I heard it when I was almost at the camper, and I just ran." He gave a sheepish laugh, and we both smiled, a nervous kind of relief passing between us. It was like we'd both been through the same nightmare and come out the other side, proof we weren't crazy. But then a cold realization hit me. That voice calling my name hadn't been Jay. I didn't tell him about it, worried it would sound too far-fetched, but we talked about the roar, how bizarre and terrifying it was. We never went back to that camper, and I never set foot in that part of the woods again. Even glancing in that direction sent shivers down my spine, a reminder of whatever was out there, waiting in the dark. It was the summer of 2003, and I was 6 years old, living in a quiet community in Michigan where everyone knew each other. One of the highlights of the summer was the midnight swim at our community pool, a special event that every kid in the neighborhood, including me and my older brother, eagerly anticipated. The pool was a hub of fun, open to everyone in the community, and usually closed at 9 p.m. on Mondays through Thursdays and Sundays, and at 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. But the midnight swims were different. They were held on 3 special Friday nights each summer, when the pool stayed open until midnight, giving us kids a thrilling chance to swim under the stars. On this particular Friday, my brother and I were buzzing with excitement for the midnight swim. The only problem was that we couldn't go until 9 p.m. because our parents had to work late. Our older sister, who was supposed to watch us, refused to leave the house early to take us to the pool, so we were stuck waiting. As the clock ticked closer to 9 o'clock, my brother and I were practically bouncing off the walls, already in our swimsuits, towels slung over our shoulders, ready to dash out the door, when my parents finally pulled into the driveway, exhausted from their long day. They told us to hold on while they got ready to join us. They needed a few minutes to change and grab their things, which felt like an eternity to my 6-year-old self. Bored and restless, I decided I couldn't just sit inside waiting. The summer air was warm, and the front lawn looked inviting under the soft glow of the streetlights. I wandered out to the front porch, kicking at the grass and pacing around, my flip-flops slapping against my feet. The neighborhood was quiet, with crickets chirping and the distant hum of cars from the main road. I was lost in my own little world, imagining the fun we'd have at the pool, when a voice broke through the stillness. "Hey, kid, come over here." At first, I froze, thinking the voice was just in my head. I mean, I was only 6 and my imagination was wild. Sometimes I'd hear things that weren't there, like characters from my favorite cartoons talking to me. But the voice came again, low and insistent. "Hey, kid, come over here." My heart skipped a beat, and I squinted into darkness, trying to figure out where it was coming from. That's when I saw him, a man standing in the shadows of the big oak trees across the street, right at the edge of our front lawn. The trees were thick, their branches casting long, dark shapes under the moonlight, and he was tucked just out of sight, barely visible. I couldn't make out his face, just a vague outline of a tall figure standing still, like he was waiting for something. My parents had drilled it into me never to talk to strangers, their warnings echoing in my mind. Asterisk, don't go near people you don't know. Stay where we can see you. Asterisk, but I was standing right in front of our house, the porch light glowing behind me, the front door just a few steps away. I felt safe enough, or at least I thought I did. Curiosity got the better of me, and I called out, my voice small but clear, "What do you want?" The man didn't step forward. His voice came again, smooth but with a strange edge to it, like he was trying to sound friendly but wasn't quite pulling it off. "I want to show you something," he said. "Come over here." I squinted harder, tried to see him better, but he stayed in the shadows, not moving an inch. Something about that felt wrong. Why wouldn't he come out where I could see him? Why was he hiding? My stomach twisted, and I took a step back toward the porch. "No," I said, my voice shakier than I wanted to be. "I'm not coming over there." The man's tone changed, sharp and angry, like I'd done something wrong. "You should listen to your elders, kid. Do as I say." His voice was loud now, almost a shout, and it hit me like a slap. I stood there, shocked, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't expected him to yell at me, and it made me feel small and stupid for even talking to him. My 6-year-old brain didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run inside, slam the door and hide under my bed, but my feet felt glued to the grass. I was scared, but I was also mad that this stranger thought he could boss me around. "I don't know you," I shouted back, my voice cracking but defiant. He laughed, a low, creepy chuckle that made my skin crawl. "I'm a friend of your parents," he said, his voice softening again, like he was trying to win me over. "They won't mind if you come talk to me. Come on, it'll be quick." His words sounded wrong, like a lie I could feel in my bones. I took another step back, my flip-flops catching on the edge of the porch steps. I was about to turn and bolt inside when the front door swung open, and my dad's voice cut through the night. "Who are you talking to, kiddo?" I whipped around, relief flooding through me at the sight of my dad standing there, his silhouette framed in the doorway. I pointed toward the trees, my hand shaking. "There's a man over there," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He told me to come over." My dad's face hardened, and he stepped out onto the porch, scanning the darkness. "Where?" he asked, his voice sharp now, protective. I turned back to point again, but the man was gone. The shadows under the trees were empty, like he'd never been there at all. The air felt still, too still, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just vanished into the night. My dad put his hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but gentle. "Let's get inside," he said, his eyes still searching the trees. I didn't argue. I ran back into the house, my heart still racing, the man's voice echoing in my head. We still went to the midnight swim that night, but I stuck close to my parents, checking over my shoulder every few minutes, half expecting to see that shadowy figure lurking in the distance. I never saw him again, but for the rest of that summer, I didn't go out on the front lawn alone. About a year ago, my boyfriend, Ethan, and I decided to take our first vacation together as a couple. We chose Rome, the eternal city known for its romance, history, and breathtaking beauty. Our flight landed smoothly at around 8 p.m., and the weather was perfect, warm with a gentle, cool breeze that carried the scent of summer. We pre-ordered a taxi, which picked us up from the airport and whisked us through the bustling streets of Rome toward our hotel. We booked the place online, expecting a charming, cozy spot based on the glossy photos we'd seen. But when the taxi pulled up, my heart sank. The hotel was nothing like the pictures. instead of a welcoming facade. We were dropped off in a dim, narrow alleyway next to a small, unassuming building with a heavy wooden door that looked like it belonged to a forgotten warehouse. We grabbed our suitcases, the wheels clattering on the uneven cobblestones, and rang the doorbell. After a few agonizing minutes of waiting in the dark alley, the door creaked open, revealing a poorly lit corridor that stretched ahead. The air inside was musty, and the faint glow of a flickering bulb barely illuminated the way. We walked down the corridor, our footsteps echoing, until we reached a small, shadowy patio area. To the left, just before the patio, was an old elevator and a narrow staircase leading to the hotel rooms on the second floor. The receptionist, a tired-looking man with a heavy Italian accent, handed us our room key with little fanfare. We took the elevator up, its gears groaning, and settled into our room. It wasn't luxurious, plain walls, a creaky bed, and a faint smell of dampness, but we were too excited about exploring Rome to care. The first 2 days were magical. We wandered through ancient churches with soaring ceilings, marveled at the grandeur of the Colosseum, and lost ourselves in the quiet halls of museums, soaking in Rome's history. On the third day, around 2 p.m., we decided to visit another church we'd found online. It wasn't on our map, but the website claimed it was just a short walk from where we were standing near the Pantheon. The sun was high, and the streets were alive with tourists and vendors. So we set off on foot, hand in hand, eager for another adventure. When we arrived, the church looked abandoned. Its stone facade was weathered, the windows boarded up, and a heavy chain hung across the entrance. Disappointed, I was ready to move on to the next attraction when Ethan called out from a narrow alley beside the building. "Hey, I found a way in." His voice was excited, and I followed him, curious but hesitant. The alley was cramped, barely wide enough for us to walk side by side, and it led to a small unlocked side door. Against my better judgment, we slipped inside. The interior was nothing like the other churches we'd visited. Instead of bright, airy spaces filled with white marble statues and golden light, this place was dark and oppressive. The floors were made of glossy black marble that reflected the faint light from a few scattered candles. Black marble statues loomed in every corner, their polished surfaces gleaming eerily. The air was heavy with a sour, musty smell, like old incense mixed with decay. There were no other visitors, no priests, no sound except our own footsteps. The place felt wrong, like we trespassed into somewhere we weren't meant to be. A chill ran down my spine, and I grabbed Ethan's hand, my unease growing with every step. As we wandered deeper, browsing the strange statues, I noticed Ethan's expression shift. He looked uneasy, his eyes darting around. "This place gives me a bad vibe," he whispered, and I nodded, feeling the same oppressive weight. Like something didn't want us there. I stepped closer to the statue of Jesus, its black marble face carved with unsettling precision. Wanted to take a picture. We hadn't seen black statues in any other churches. They'd all been white, bathed in light. As I raised my phone, Ethan's voice cut through the silence. Is that a skull?" He was pointing at the base of one of the statues, where a small, white object sat nestled in a carved alcove. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. It was indeed a skull, human and unmistakably real, its empty socket staring back at us. A faded Latin inscription was etched beside it, but neither of us could read it. Maybe they were important Christians or something. I said, try to make sense of it, but my voice trembled. The discovery was too much. The creeping dread, the unnatural darkness, the stench, it was overwhelming. We didn't need to say anything else. We turned and hurried out of the church, bursting back into the bright Roman sunlight. The warmth and bustle of the city felt like a lifeline, and we spent the rest of the day exploring, trying to shake off the unease. By midnight, we were exhausted and collapsed into bed at the hotel, hoping for a restful night. At 3 a.m., I jolted awake from a nightmare so vivid it left my heart racing. In the dream, someone was murdering my family with a knife, their screams echoing as I stood frozen, unable to help. The room was cool, but the bed felt wrong, cold and wet. Confused, I pulled back the covers and gasped. The half of the bed where Ethan was sleeping was soaking wet, the sheets clinging to him. He was shaking violently, his body trembling as if he were freezing, sweat pouring down his face despite the chilly room. His lips moved, mumbling incoherent words, his eyes squeezed shut. I'd never seen him like this. He'd never done anything like this before. Panicked, I touched his forehead, expecting a fever, but his skin was ice cold. "Ethan," I called, shaking him gently, then harder, but he wouldn't wake up. His mumbling grew louder, frantic, like he was trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape. My mind raced. I didn't know what to do. Desperate, I grabbed a thin, dry blanket from the chair and spread it over the side of the bed, then pushed him onto the dry side, hoping to make him more comfortable. I climbed onto the bed, holding him tightly, whispering to him to calm down. Slowly, his shaking eased, and his mumbling faded into soft breaths. Exhausted and shaken, I eventually drifted back to sleep, curled up beside him. In the morning, we dragged ourselves to the hotel's dining room, still rattled from the night before. Over coffee and pastries, I told Ethan about my nightmare, the horrifying vision of my family being slaughtered. His face went pale, and when I asked what was wrong, he spoke quietly, his voice unsteady. "I had a nightmare too," he said. "I was the one holding the knife, killing a family, and it felt like I couldn't wake up, like something was holding me in the dream." The coincidence was chilling. We sat in stunned silence, trying to process the fact that our nightmares had mirrored each other in such a twisted way. We agreed to push it aside and focus on enjoying the rest of our trip, but the unease lingered like a shadow. That day, we threw ourselves into Rome's beauty, visiting piazzas and tossing coins into the Trevi fountain under the stars. We laughed over dinner at a cozy local restaurant, the clink of wine glasses and the hum of conversation helping us forget the previous night. After a romantic evening stroll, we headed back to the hotel around 2 a.m., tired but happy. The dark alley leading to the hotel felt less ominous now, and we made our way through the familiar corridor toward the elevator. My legs ached from walking all day, so I insisted on taking the elevator instead of the stairs. As we stood waiting for the elevator, I glanced toward the patio at the end of the corridor, and my blood ran cold. "Baby, what is it?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I pointed to the far corner, about 5 or 6 meters away. Ethan followed my gaze, his face paling. You can see that too, right?" he said, his voice barely audible. There, in the shadowed corner of the patio, stood a tall, humanoid figure draped in a long, pointed black cloak. Its face was hidden, but I could feel its eyes locked on us, unblinking and malevolent. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would burst. We stood frozen, too terrified to move or even breathe, staring at the creature as it stared back. The moment stretched on for what felt like an eternity, maybe 2 minutes, but we didn't notice the elevator doors had opened behind us. When we finally snapped out of our trance, we scrambled inside, slamming the button for our floor so hard I thought we'd break it. The doors closed agonizingly slowly, and as the elevator began to climb, we watched the floor indicator. 0, 1, 2. This was our floor, but the doors didn't open. We waited, pressing the button again, our panic rising. Come on, Ethan muttered, his voice tight. I pressed the emergency bell, ringing it frantically until we heard the receptionist's voice crackle through the speaker, saying he was calling for help. Suddenly, the door slid open as if nothing had been wrong. We stumbled out, hearts racing, and bolted to our room, locking the door behind us. We tried to calm ourselves, sitting on the bed and telling each other it was just our imagination, that the creepy church and the nightmares had us on edge. But the fear was real and we both knew it. I decided to take a shower to relax, hoping the hot water would wash away the dread. I locked the bathroom door, placed a fresh towel on the edge of the sink, and started undressing. As I reached to unclasp my bra, something grabbed my wrist, hard. I gasped, spinning around, expecting to see Ethan playing a prank, But the bathroom was empty. The door was still locked, exactly as I'd left it. My skin prickled and a heavy, oppressive feeling settled over me, like someone was watching, their presence dark and suffocating. A wave of sadness and anger washed through me, emotions that didn't feel like mine. Furious and terrified, I shouted into the empty room, "If there are any spirits in here, you get the hell out of this room and leave us alone. You're not welcome here." My voice echoed off the tiles, and for a moment, there was silence. The oppressive feeling lifted, the sense of being watched fading away. I felt a surge of triumph, like I'd chased something away with my words. I finished my shower quickly, my heart still racing, and stepped out to tell Ethan everything. He listened wide-eyed, and when he wanted to take his own shower, he came back looking shaken. "I felt it too," he said, "like something was watching me the whole time." The next morning, we woke up in terrible shape. My chest felt tight, and I was coughing uncontrollably. Ethan was no better, struggling to breathe, his face pale. We were sick for the rest of the trip, barely able to enjoy the remaining days in Rome. When we got home, we were both diagnosed with severe pneumonia. Ethan recovered quickly, but I wasn't so lucky. For weeks, I coughed until my lungs burned, waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was choking me. Nightmares plagued me, dark and vivid, unlike anything I'd experienced before. I'd always been healthy, never suffering more than a sore throat, but this was different. I couldn't shake the thought that our sickness was connected to that church, that creature in the cloak, and the oppressive presence in the hotel. Even now, I wonder if something followed us from that dark place in Rome. When I was a teenager, my parents bought a sprawling old house in Missouri, a place that seemed like a dream home for our large family. What we didn't know at the time was that it had once been a church, a place where wakes and funerals were held, its walls steeped in sorrow and ritual. The previous owner, a woman whose name we never learned, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind her purse, toothbrush, clothes, everything. It was as if she'd stepped out one day and never came back. Her belongings painted a strange picture, a vast collection of occult books and texts on Satanism, their worn covers and cryptic symbols giving off an unsettling energy. My parents, practical as ever, decided to clear out her things with sale before we moved in, hoping to start fresh in the massive house that seemed perfect for our big family. But the house was anything but welcoming. One of the first things we noticed was the mirrors, dozens of them, up to 50, covering nearly every room from floor to ceiling. They weren't decorative or elegant. They were cold, oppressive, reflecting everything in a way that made the air feel heavy. Staring into them, I felt a creeping dread, like they were watching me back. I couldn't shake the thought that the previous owner had used them for something dark, maybe as portals for spirits or worse. The mirrors gave off an evil vibe, and I avoided looking into them whenever I could. The strange occurrences started almost immediately. On our first night, the dining room chandelier, a heavy ornate fixture, crashed down onto the table where my baby sister was sitting. She was shaken but miraculously unhurt, her wide eyes staring at the shattered glass. We chalked it up to a fluke, but the next night, the kitchen lighting fixture fell, crashing onto my dad as he stood at the counter. It had been securely fastened, or so we thought, and the incident left us rattled. By the third night, when another lighting fixture fell on my dad again, we knew something was wrong. These weren't accidents. They felt deliberate, like the house was testing us. The energy in the house was relentless. Our utility bills skyrocketed, as if something was draining power we couldn't see. Doors swung open and slammed shut on their own, their hinges creaking in the dead of night. Clothes racks in the closets rattled violently, as if shaken by invisible hands. Heavy footsteps echoed up and down the stairs, sometimes slow and deliberate, other times racing like someone was fleeing or chasing. Objects disappeared, only to reappear in strange places. Keys in the freezer, shoes on the couch. Worst of all were the voices, mimicking, mocking, calling out to us in tones that weren't quite human. They targeted me the most whisper my name, Alex, in the dark, over and over, until it became a constant hum in my life. For 3 years, I lived under a heavy darkness, like a cloak of anxiety and dread draped over me. It wasn't just fear, it was a suffocating weight, a sadness that clung to my bones. Every night, my name echoed through the house, soft, insistent, sometimes mocking. Alex, Alex. I'd hear it as I walked through the dim hallways, the mirrors reflecting my pale, tired face. At first, it terrified me, but after so long, I got used to it, which was its own kind of horror. I learned to ignore the whispers, to pretend they were just the wind or my imagination, but they never stopped. One incident stood out among the rest. I was upstairs in my bedroom with a friend who was staying over. Out of nowhere, the biggest crow I'd ever seen appeared in the room. It wasn't there one moment, and then it was perched on my dresser, its black eyes glinting like the mirrors. My friend screamed, her voice piercing the silence, and I tried to stay calm, telling her, "Just ignore it. It'll be gone by morning." I don't know why I said that. Maybe I was so used to the house's strangeness that I thought it was normal. Sure enough, by morning, the crow was gone, with no windows or doors open to explain how it got in or out. My friend was so shaken that she scratched her arm going down the stairs the next day, desperate to leave. She never came back, and I couldn't blame her. We had the house blessed, hoping it would bring peace, but it only made things worse. The activity intensified, like we'd angered whatever was there. Every night, without fail, I'd wake up at 3:17 a.m., my heart racing, the air thick with a presence I couldn't see. No matter what I did, counting sheep, leaving the lights on, praying, I'd snap awake at that exact time. Eventually, I gave up trying to sleep through the night. I'd stay awake until dawn, watching the clock tick past 3:17, and then sleep until noon when the house felt safer, quieter. One night, I was in the living room with my dog, a small, scrappy terrier who was usually fearless. It was around 2:30 a.m., and I decided to watch a movie to distract myself from the house's constant unease. I'd made a plate of nachos, the cheesy smell filling the air, and settled onto the couch with my dog curled up beside me. The movie was playing softly, the glow of the TV casting shadows across the room. As I walked to the dining room to grab a drink, I heard the usual whisper, my name, Alex, hiss from the darkness. I ignored it, my heart pounding, but my resolve hardened from years of this torment. I cuddled up with my dog, pulling a blanket over us, and for a while, everything felt okay. Then, about an hour into the movie, it happened. A voice, unlike anything I'd ever heard, screamed directly into my left ear. "Alex, I want you back." It was pure hate, violent and forceful, so loud and fast it felt like a physical blow. The voice was evil, like it came from something not human, something that wanted to consume me. I leapt out of my chair, my heart slamming against my ribs. My dog went berserk, jumping to the top of the recliner, barking ferociously at something in the corner of the room. Something I couldn't see. The air was thick, oppressive, like the house itself was closing in on me. I grabbed my dog, clutching him tightly, and ran to my mom's bedroom. My hands were shaking as I spread a blanket at the foot of her bed and crawled onto it, trying not to wake her. Tears streamed down my face, but I bit my lip to keep from sobbing out loud. "I'm okay here," I told myself. "Nothing can hurt me with Mom here." I prayed silently, my heart still racing, begging for protection, but then I felt a sharp, burning pain on my right leg. I looked down and saw 3 huge claw marks raked across my calf, red and angry, as if something had slashed me. I scrambled off the floor, my breath hitching, and climbed into bed beside my mom, curling up as close as I could without waking her. I lay there, trembling, praying the darkness wouldn't find me. After that night, the house went wild. It was like whatever was there had been unleashed. We heard crashes upstairs, like furniture being thrown, but when we checked, nothing was out of place. No one had broken in. Yet the sounds of smashing and running footsteps echoed through the house. The entity, whatever it was, started targeting my younger sister. She and my other sister began seeing a man in a hat, a shadowy figure that appeared in doorways or at the foot of their beds. One night, a knife flew across the room toward my youngest sister, missing her by inches. The house mimicked her voice, too, crying out in distress to lure visitors into empty rooms. People who came over would hear her sobbing, only to find she wasn't even home. I couldn't take it anymore. The house had fed off my fear, my depression, for too long, wrapping me in its dark, suffocating energy. I moved out, desperate to escape the nightmares that haunted me even in my sleep. The rest of my family eventually left, too, and I was relieved when they did. That house was the worst place I'd ever lived, a living nightmare that felt alive with malice. The voice that screamed in my ear, demanding I come back, still haunts me. I don't know what it was or why it wanted me, and I pray I never see its face. All my life, I've lived in creepy houses, but that place in Missouri was a darkness I'll never forget. It was about a year ago when I was working as a pizza delivery driver. My shifts often stretched late into the night, and while I'd heard stories from other women at the job about occasional sexual harassment, I never felt particularly nervous on my deliveries. Maybe it was because I'd grown used to the rhythm of the work, or maybe I just trusted my instincts to keep me safe. Either way, this particular night shook me in a way I hadn't expected. It was around 11 p.m. when I pulled up to a house in an Australian suburb that was, to put it bluntly, pretty run down. Derelict houses, overgrown lawns, and a general air of neglect weren't uncommon in this area. I parked my car out front, and there are two key details you need to know here. First, the pizza was on the passenger side of the car, and second, this was the kind of place where you'd often see sketchy characters lingering on the streets. As I stepped out of the driver's seat, I immediately noticed a guy, probably in his early 20s, standing across the road. He was just standing there, facing me, his posture stiff and unreadable in the dim streetlight. This was entirely unusual for the area. People hung around at all hours, so, being in a rush, I didn't think much of it. I had a job to do, and I wasn't about to let some random guy slow me down. I started walking around the car to the passenger side to grab the pizza. That's when I realized he was no longer across the street. He was right behind me. My heart gave a little jolt, but I kept my cool. He spoke first, his voice casual but oddly close. "Hey, do you have the time?" he asked. I glanced at him, trying to stay nonchalant, and replied, "It's about 11-ish. His presence didn't immediately put me on edge. I was used to deal with odd characters in this job. People asking random questions or making small talk weren't out of the ordinary. But as I opened the passenger door to retrieve the pizza, a subtle wave of unease washed over me. I could feel him still standing there, just behind me, not saying a word. Looking back now, it's chilling how faint that gut feeling was, how easy it would have been to brush it off and keep going. I'm so grateful I didn't. Trying to act casual, I quickly closed the passenger door, my hands moving faster than my brain could process. I walked briskly around the driver's side, hopped into the car, and locked the doors with a satisfying click. My heart was pounding now, but I told myself I was probably being overly cautious. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine humming to life, and shifted into drive, ready to pull away if needed. But sure enough, as I glanced in my side mirror, there he was, popping around to my side of the car, his figure looming closer in the darkness. At this point, I felt a strange mix of relief and pride in my quick thinking. I was safe inside the locked car, and I trusted my instincts. Still, I needed to figure out what this guy wanted. I cracked the window just enough to hear him clearly. Keeping my hand on the gear shift, he leaned in slightly and asked again, "Do you have the time on you?" I frowned, confused. He just asked me that a moment ago. "It's 11 o'clock, I said, my voice steady but firm. Then he shifted gears, his tone taking on a more insistent edge. "Can you give me a lift?" I need to go to my friend's place. That's where you're delivering, right? I shook my head, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. No, he didn't back off. I know whose pizza that is, he said, gesturing toward the pizza bag on the passenger seat. It's my friend's, just down the road. I can show you where it is if you give me a ride. The conversation dragged on, his persistence growing more unsettling with every word. He kept pushing, repeating variations of the same request, trying to convince me to let him in the car. My patience wore thin, and the unease I'd felt earlier was now a full-blown alarm bell ringing in my head. Finally, I'd had enough. Get out of here, I said sharply, my voice cutting through the night air. I'm calling the police. I rolled up the window, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled out my phone and started dialing. As I spoke to the dispatcher, he began yelling, his voice rising in frustration, and then he started banging on my window, hard. The sound of his fist against the glass sent a chill down my spine, but I stayed focused, relaying details to the police. Thankfully, after a few tense moments, he gave up and stormed off into the darkness. I sat there, heart racing, waiting for the police to arrive. When they showed up, they searched the area for him but came up empty-handed. I went ahead and delivered the pizza, my nerves still on edge but my resolve intact. Incidents like this weren't entirely uncommon in my line of work. Most of the time, it was just immature comments or crude attempts at harassment, but this felt different and more calculated, and it left me shaken. I don't know what that guy's intentions were, and I'm damn glad I didn't find out. That night stuck with me, a stark reminder to always stay alert, no matter how routine the job felt. Even now, thinking back on it, it still creeps me out. It was early July, during the 4th of July weekend, and I was stationed at a military base where I lived in the barracks, being unmarried and unable to afford my own place off base. For security reasons, I won't disclose the name or location of the base, but I can tell you it's typically a quiet place, especially during the week. The only exception is the occasional weekend parties that liven up the common areas. I work the night shift 4 days a week, from 2 p.m. to midnight. So most nights when I return to my room, the barracks are calm, almost eerily silent. But this particular night, a Thursday, my last workday before the 4-day holiday weekend, things felt different, and what happened still sends a shiver down my spine when I think about it. To give you a sense of the layout, the barracks consist of 4 3-story buildings arranged around a large concrete common area. Since smoking isn't allowed in our rooms, the common area has 2 designated smoke pits on either side, each equipped with picnic table, a grill, and a large trash bin, all sheltered under an awning to keep out the rain. These pits are the usual spots for weekend parties, especially the one furthest from my building, where most of the noise and crowds gather. That night, I'd gotten off work early, around 10 p.m., and made my way back to the barracks. As expected for a holiday weekend with no work the next day, there was a lively party going on at the far smoke pit, with music and laughter echoing across the common area. Most of the people outside were gathered there, but as I approached my building's smoke pit, I noticed one person sitting alone at the picnic table. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just someone stepping out to smoke, maybe not in the mood for the party's chaos. But something about him caught my attention. He was dressed in blue jeans and a red hoodie, the hood pulled up over his head, which struck me as odd. It was the middle of July in the South, hot and humid even at night, and yet here he was bundled up like it was winter. The barracks air conditioning is notoriously overzealous. NCOs keep it cranked to around 65 degrees Fahrenheit all summer, for reasons no one quite understands. So I rationalized that maybe he'd stepped outside to warm up. He was sitting on the table, not the benches, with his hands stuffed in his front pocket and his head tilted down, staring blankly at his lap. What really stood out, though, was that he wasn't smoking. No cigarette, no vape, not even scrolling on his phone, just sitting there motionless in a way that felt unnervingly out of place. Wanting to have a quick smoke myself, I walked over to the opposite side of the picnic table. keeping some distance between us. I lit my cigarette, the faint glow of the lighter briefly illuminating the space. The guy didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge me. He just sat there, his face obscured by the hood, his gaze fixed downward. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the party across the common area. I finished my cigarette, feeling a growing sense of unease but brushing it off as paranoia. I stubbed out the butt and headed to my room, ready to unwind after a long shift. A few details about my living situation are important here. Each barracks room houses 2 soldiers, and the doors automatically lock when closed. Only the unit headquarters and the room's residents have keys. If you lose your key, you're stuck calling someone to unlock the door every time you need to get in until a replacement is issued. My room is on the 2nd floor, tucked around the back of the building, so there's hardly any foot traffic outside my door compared to the rest of the barracks. My side of the room has the only window, and the door is right there, so I can hear if anyone passes by. My roommate works an odd shift from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., and I wasn't sure what days he was on that week. The room is pitch black when I enter, so I can't always tell if he's asleep in his bunk. Out of habit, I close the door quietly, keeping the knob turned to avoid waking him if he's there. That night, I knew he wouldn't be home yet, given his shift. After getting to my room, I changed out of my uniform, settled in, and started scrolling through YouTube to decompress. Around 2 a.m., I decided it was time to hit the sack. As I was about to drift off, I heard a faint shuffling sound outside. Curious, I peeked out the window and saw a girl stumbling across the common area, clearly drunk, struggling to make her way to her room. I recognized her. She lived in the room next to mine. Since she was literally steps away from her door, I figured she didn't need help and went back to settling in. I listened for a bit, my ear tuned to the sounds outside, until I heard her door open and close, confirming she'd made it inside safely. About 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps approaching my door. They were slow, deliberate, and stopped right outside. My first thought was that it might be my roommate coming back early, but there was no familiar jingle of keys or the telltale click of the lock turning. Just silence, a long, heavy silence that made my stomach twist. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the soft creak of my door being pushed open. No sound of the knob turning, no click of the lock disengaging. Just the door slowly swinging inward, as if someone was trying to slip in without making a sound. My heart leapt into my throat. I bolted upright in bed, my eyes locked on the foot of my bed where the door was. In the faint light spilling in from the hallway, I saw a figure step inside, not in uniform, but wearing that same red hoodie I'd seen at the smoke pit. My blood ran cold. Get the hell out. I screamed, my voice sharp with panic. The guy froze, startled by my shout, then bolted out of the room, his footsteps pounding down the hall. I scrambled out of bed, adrenaline surging, and ran to the door. By the time I reached it, I caught a glimpse of him leaping over the 2nd floor railing, landing in the bushes below, and sprinting across the common area into the darkness. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and dialed the MPs. They arrived within minutes, their flashlights cutting through the night as a few of them searched the area while others went room to room, checking on everyone. They discovered that the girl's room next to mine hadn't been fully closed either, a detail that made my skin crawl. Weeks later, I learned the full story. The guy wasn't even a soldier. He was the ex-boyfriend of the girl next door. That night, he'd been at the base, though no one could figure out how he got past the ID check at the gate, especially since he had no identification on him. He didn't know which room was hers and had followed her from the party, intending to prey on her while she was drunk and alone, knowing she didn't have a roommate. My attempt to be quiet that night had backfired. I hadn't fully closed my door, leaving it slightly ajar, and he'd mistaken my room for hers. The girl's door wasn't fully closed either, so if he hadn't mixed up the rooms, he could have slipped into hers while she was passed out, completely vulnerable. Thankfully, my scream had scared him off, and the girl was safe. But the thought of what could have happened if I'd been asleep, when he crept in, still haunts me. The barracks are supposed to be a secure place for soldiers to rest, and incidents like this are rare. But that night was a stark reminder that you can never let your guard down, no matter where you are. It's a lesson I carry with me, and even now, the memory of that red hoodie in my doorway gives me chills. Not long after I moved into my new apartment, I was hit with a serious illness that forced me to leave the place barely settled and stay with my parents while I received treatment at the hospital. The apartment on the third floor of a quiet complex was still filled with unpacked boxes, as I had been too sick to properly move in. Hardly anyone knew my new address, not friends, not co-workers, just my immediate family. So, when the first incident happened, it left me rattled in a way I couldn't shake. While I was away, someone broke into my apartment. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no jimmied locks, which only made the whole thing creepier. The intruder didn't touch the TV mounted on the wall, ignored the jar of cash sitting in plain sight on my dresser, and left behind my collection of DIY recipe books, which were neatly stacked in a box. What they took, though, was deeply personal. Every single one of my diaries. These weren't just any notebooks. I've been using the same distinctive style of journal for years, filled with my thoughts, memories, and experiences dating back to my teens. They were scattered across different boxes, packed haphazardly in my rush to leave for the hospital. Whoever did this had clearly rifled through my belongings, deliberately seeking out those diaries and nothing else. The fact that they left my recipe books, which were nearly identical in appearance, meant they'd taken the time to check, to make sure they were taking only the journals. The thought of someone digging through my private thoughts like that made my skin crawl. I only discovered the theft when I returned from my parents' place, feeling weak but eager to finally settle in. As I sorted through the boxes, I noticed the diaries were gone. At first, I thought I misplaced them, but after tearing through every box, my heart sank. Someone had been in my space, touching my things, and they'd chosen the one thing that felt like an extension of myself. The police were called, but with no signs of a break-in and no witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. I couldn't help but wonder how they'd gotten in. The apartment was on the third floor, accessible only by stairs or an elevator, but I noticed a small metal handle on the outside of the pillars on my porch, running all the way to ground. It was just sturdy enough for someone to climb, though the idea of someone scaling 3 stories to get to my balcony felt both far-fetched and terrifying. A couple of months later, the second incident happened, and it was even stranger. I'd come home one night after a long day, my mind preoccupied with work and the lingering stress of the earlier break-in. As I approached my apartment door, I noticed the exterior light above was out. It was one of those motion sensor lights, usually reliable, so I didn't think much of it. Just assumed the bulb had burned out and made a mental note to call maintenance in the morning. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and flipped the switch for the living room light. Nothing happened. The room stayed dark. Frowning, I tried another switch, then another. Every light in the apartment was out. My first thought was a power outage, but then I glanced at the microwave in the kitchen. Its digital clock glowed faintly, displaying the correct time, ticking away as if nothing was wrong. That's when a cold, creeping dread settled in my chest. Something was off, way off. I stood there for a moment, frozen, my hand still on the light switch, trying to make sense of it. The microwave was working, so it wasn't a power issue. The darkness felt deliberate, oppressive, like the apartment itself was holding its breath. I backed out of the doorway, my heart pounding, and decided I wasn't staying there alone. I hurried back to my car, locked the doors, and called the apartment complex's on-call agent. My voice was shaky as I explained what I'd found, and he agreed to come check it out. I waited outside, my eyes scanning the parking lot, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. When the agent arrived, he went inside while I stayed by my car, clutching my phone like a lifeline. After what felt like an eternity, he came back out, his face pale. "You need to call the cops," he said, his voice low and serious. My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" I asked. He explained that nothing had been taken. Not a single thing was out of place, but every light bulb in the apartment had been unscrewed just enough to break the connection, ensuring the lights wouldn't turn on. Every single one. From the living room to the bedroom to the bathroom. The precision of it was what got to me. Someone had gone through my home, methodically twisting each bulb, leaving the apartment in darkness for me to walk into. The thought of someone being in there, planning that, made my blood run cold. The police came quickly, their flashlights sweeping through the apartment as they checked for any signs of an intruder. They found nothing, no fingerprints, no forced entry, no clues. Just a perfectly undisturbed apartment, with every light bulb loosened. They advised me to stay somewhere else for the night, and I didn't argue. I crashed at a friend's place, barely sleeping as my mind raced with questions. Who would do this? Was it the same person who took my diaries? And why? The next day, I called my sister, spilling the whole unsettling story. She and her boyfriend drove 3 hours to my place, determined to make it safer. Against the apartment complex's rules, they installed heavy-duty deadbolts on my door. The management didn't protest. They were just as creeped out as I was. And I think they felt guilty that something like this could happen in their secure building. What's strangest of all is that nothing else happened after that. I lived in that apartment for 2 more years, always on edge, always double-checking the locks and the balcony. But no more break-ins, no more strange occurrences. Still, the memory of those incidents lingers. The idea of someone climbing up to my 3rd-floor apartment to steal my diaries, or sneaking in to tamper with every light bulb, feels like something out of a nightmare. It's the kind of thing that makes you question how safe you really are, no matter where you live. Even now, when I turn on a light and it doesn't work, my heart skips a beat, and I'm right back in that dark apartment, wondering who's been there. It all began on Valentine's Day, seemingly harmless. I started receiving text messages from an unknown number, each one dripping with the vibe of a secret admirer. At first, I brushed it off as a prank. I was in a room full of tech-savvy friends at the time, so I figured one of them was messing with me. I studied their faces, trying to catch a smirk or a telltale glance, and even asked outright if anyone was behind it. They all denied it, and I believed them. Their reaction seemed genuine. My suspicion was confirmed when I got a phone call from the same number. A voice on the other end asked, "Is this Jason?" I replied, "Yeah, who's this?" hoping to recognize the voice. But they hung up immediately and went back to texting. Most of my friends lived together, and the ones who didn't weren't the type to go through the trouble of signing up for a fake number texting service just for a prank. Things took a strange turn when the texter started asking personal questions. Things like, "Are you doing something tonight?" Over and over. I told them I was working, but they kept pushing, insisting we should meet up. On top of that, I started getting random images from a separate email address. That confirmed the number wasn't real, and now I had a username to tie to the mystery person. I'm the kind of guy who enjoys unraveling puzzles like this. So I decided to play along without giving away anything about myself. I kept texting back, gathering bits and pieces of information, building a profile and narrowing down who it could be. Unfortunately, this only seemed to encourage them. The texts got weirder. They started demanding pictures, and then they sent one that threw me off. A photo of a white lacy dress hanging in a closet with the caption, "My wedding dress for when I marry you," followed by a string of heart and love emojis. They asked for a picture of my reaction, and I flat out refused. They pushed harder, saying, "Why not? Please, picture your surroundings, your room, your face, anything more." I shot back, "You gotta tell me who you are first, or I'm definitely not sending anything." Their response? "I'm not telling you who I am. I don't feel comfortable yet." I couldn't believe it. They doubled down. "I'm not telling you until I feel comfortable." I thought to myself, "You've got to be kidding me. You're the one who's uncomfortable?" They kept prying about my plans for the evening, but I stayed vague. Then they slipped up and mentioned they'd be at a party on campus that night. I couldn't go anyway since I was working, but it was a clue. The conversation was chaotic. Like 3 different people were texting me at once, jumping between topics. They bombarded me with questions about my past relationships and what kind of girl I'm most attracted to. After some back and forth, they dropped another bombshell. Do you live in apartment 68? That was my actual apartment number, but I lied, saying close, but not quite. They replied, "Oh, could have sworn. Where do you live? Are you involved with anyone right now?" I'd noticed something earlier in one of their photos. The edge of a doorframe in a picture of their apartment. It was the same color as the ones in the crummy campus apartments. So I threw a curveball. You live in 52, right? They freaked out. What? How do you know? I explained I recognized the doorframe from their photo. That seemed to throw them off, and the conversation fizzled out. I didn't go to the party, and the text stopped. Among the images they sent were screenshots of my own Facebook photos, a picture of their bed, a pipe, some posters, and other random, boring stuff. That was February. Fast forward October of the next school year. I was a senior, swamped with work, when I got a text from another unknown number. They asked if it was me, and I played dumb, pretending I wasn't freaking out that this person was back after months of silence. I still hadn't figured out who they were, and these new texts were instantly more personal, creeping me out even more. They wrote, "Don't ruin the fun. Not knowing who I am is part of the mystery. I won't tell you who I am. Not now. Too much to lose. I don't want you to know, not because I'm being cruel. It's just better if you didn't know." I thought, that doesn't even make sense. They kept going. "Trust me, you don't want to know. You'll be better off not knowing." I was fed up and curious, so I responded, "Okay, whatever. Why are you texting me again anyway? Are you mad at me?" They replied, "I just have no one to talk to. Does my personhood really matter? Can we talk about something else?" I shot back, like, what? I'm pretty tired of this crap and trying to work, but I'll play along to see if I can figure you out. I kept my responses minimal, fishing for more clues. They asked, "Do you celebrate Halloween? I guess I'm boring you. I have a better question. Have you ever been in love?" I answered, no. They came back with, "How do you know? If you never experienced it." For a response so extreme, you'd think you'd know, but I guess it's a matter of perspective. You must be a godly man then. The texts were coming so fast, I could barely keep up. They added, "Was that too harsh?" Followed by explosion and violent emojis. The next day, around the same time, another text came through. They mentioned a friend they'd been talking to about me, but I was convinced this friend was made up. They said, "I was talking to my friend about you today." I asked, "Who's your friend? Don't you want to know what we talked about?" I replied, yeah, sure." 3 hours later, they texted, "We talked about how you seem like the type of person fall in love easily. You're a sap, not in a negative way, just an observation, like you're wishing for the one." I laughed it off and said, "All you care about is finding out about my identity. That'd be the most awkward thing ever. Why so eager? Wouldn't you be weirded out?" They responded, no, probably not. I was lying. I was definitely weirded out. I decided to mess with them, asking random questions like, "Do you like cats? Do you like long walks on the beach?" They got mad, saying, "I live by the beach." "Which one?" "A famous one. A lot of people have sex on the beach under the blanket of night near a city." I asked, "How do you know I'm from there?" They replied, "The internet is my best friend. Are you nervous? You are boyish, let's admit it. It's nothing bad, it's cute. How old are you? You haven't figured that out already? When's your birthday? Month and day. Please, tell me now. I just want to know your sign." I gave them a half-truth. "Virgo." They said, "I like Virgos. You're obedient, submissive, like a puppy dog." Isn't that funny? I just laughed. I turned the tables, asking, have you been in a relationship before? Why did it fail? They dodged, saying, I'm not telling you about this. This is annoying. Then they sent a flood of random Google images. They added, my friend asked me to ask you something, but I don't think I will. Can we change subjects? How was your day? Mine was bad. I don't want to relive it. It was something I did wrong, so I only have myself to blame. She wanted to ask something intimate, but I'm not going to share it, since you don't like to talk about that. It's extreme, and you're probably not going to answer. I feel sick asking it. Don't hate me. I'm just a messenger. I'm embarrassed. You're not going to answer. They finally asked, so, we really want to know if you're a virgin or not. Scratch the virgin part. If you've ever had intercourse. I didn't respond, and they didn't text again. That was October. In December, at the end of the semester, they reached out again. Hey, who's this? I asked. They replied, it's me? I can tell you who I am when I leave campus. I'm never going to see you again, but I can tell you then. I said, okay, tell me when you leave. They texted, I'm leaving next week. You're so serious. You're ruining it. Then they sent, I want to punch you. Sorry, I didn't mean to send the last one. After that, they called me 14 times that night. I declined every call, but they kept coming. I texted the fake number, begging them to stop. More calls followed, so I turned off my phone. The next week, I was in the class where I was a teaching assistant. Students were presenting their final projects on the projector, and I had multiple tabs queued up on the projection computer. 2 students had worked on a shared Google Drive. When the second student logged in, they didn't use a private window, so we logged out the first student. I noticed this, but the first student wasn't in the room. When she returned, I asked her to log back in. We were both in the projection booth. She was at the computer, and I was fiddling with the sound system. I glanced at the projector screen as she logged into Google, and my heart stopped. The username she used was the same as the one tied to the email account that had been sending me photos. I quickly turned away, pretending to be busy until she finished. I thanked her, and she left the booth, oblivious to her mistake. I played it cool, but inside I was reeling. After almost a year, I knew who it was. This girl had a reputation among my friends for being creepy. She'd never interacted with me outside of class, but my friends had stories. My friend Michael was once working on his thesis in the lab, about 50 hours into a sleepless work marathon. It was 7 a.m. when she walked in and started using a computer. Another guy, Dave, came in and teased Michael, saying, "You're still here?" Michael replied, "Yeah, I've been working for days." Starting to see things out the corner of my eye, sometimes a tall man in a suit. She whipped around and said, "You see him too?" Michael didn't know how to respond, and Dave laughed it off, joking about the ghost of the building. She didn't say anything else and went back to work. Another friend, Isaac, often worked late in the same building. Sometimes, around 3 a.m., he'd find her waiting outside the front door. She'd follow him home, and occasionally, she'd show up at his apartment at night, demanding to be let in. One night, when I was at Isaac's place, she came to the back door and knocked for over 20 minutes. We pretended no one was home, closed the blinds, and hid upstairs. There were other incidents too, like when she attacked Isaac at a party. But that's a whole other story. Point is, she had a reputation in our friend group, and we tried to steer clear. I'd always thought I was immune to her antics. I was shaken but didn't know what to do. Someone suggested filing a complaint with the school or getting a restraining order. I figure if my friends and I shared our experiences, we could at least keep her away from us. I met with a counselor who seemed sympathetic and promised to look into it. A couple of weeks later, she emailed me saying the student was going abroad next semester, so they weren't going to take action. I pushed for something temporary, pointing out that while I was graduating, Isaac would be back for another year. But the school did nothing. Typical for an institution notorious for not caring. I never ran into her again, and she hasn't texted me since. Isaac took a year off, so for now, that's where the story ends. The warehouse loomed before me, a massive silhouette against the night sky, its rusted metal walls swallowing the faint glow of the streetlights. I fumbled with the new set of keys, my fingers clumsy in the cold, unable to shake the prickling sensation that I was being watched. It was my first night as a security guard, a job I had taken out of sheer desperation, and I had no idea it would be my last, or that it would stretch into the longest, most terrifying night of my life. Bills had been piling up for months. Rent, utilities, a car repair that drained my savings. The night shift at the warehouse promised a little extra pay, and I figured, how hard could it be? Patrol an empty building. Keep an eye on some crates. Maybe catch up on podcasts to stay awake. I'd breeze through the training, barely registering the supervisor's warnings about staying alert and following protocols. It was just a formality, I thought, a box to check before collecting a paycheck. I couldn't have been more wrong. The lock clicked open with a reluctant groan, and I stepped inside, flicking on my flashlight. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing rows of towering shelves stacked with crates and pallets, their shapes hulking and indistinct in the shadows. The air was thick with the musty smell of cardboard and dust, tinged with a faint metallic tang that made my nose wrinkle. I made my way to the small security office near the entrance, my boots echoing on the concrete floor, each step louder than I'd like. The shadows seemed to shift just beyond my flashlight's reach, playing tricks on my eyes, but I chalked it up to nerves. First night jitters, nothing more. The office was a cramped box of a room, its fluorescent lights harsh but comforting after the warehouse's gloom. A creaky chair sat in front of a bank of grainy monitors, showing feeds from cameras scattered throughout the building. I settled in, the chair groaning under my weight, and muttered to myself, "Okay, John, just stay awake for 8 hours and you're golden." The monitors flickered, displaying endless rows of shelves, a loading dock, and a few dark corners where the cameras didn't quite reach. Everything looked quiet, just as it should. The first hour dragged on, the silence broken only by the hum of the monitors and the occasional creak of the building settling. I alternated between watching the screens and doing rounds, my flashlight beam darting across the shelves as I walked the aisles. The warehouse was a maze, its high ceilings disappearing into darkness, the air growing colder the deeper I went. My footsteps echoed, a lonely sound in the cavernous space, and I found myself humming to fill the quiet, trying to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. It was during my second round, as I neared the back of the warehouse, that I heard it, a faint metallic clink, like a tool tapping against a pipe. I froze, my flashlight beam stuttering as my hand shook. I strained my ears, holding my breath. There was again, sharper this time, deliberate. My heart kicked into a faster rhythm, a dull thud in my chest. Buildings settle, I told myself. Pipes expand, crates shift. But this wasn't that. This was something else. I swung my flashlight around, the beam cutting through the dark, catching nothing but crates and shadows. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing off the shelves, sounding thinner than I'd intended. "This is security. If someone's in here, you need to leave now." Silence answered, heavy and oppressive, stretching out until I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the sound. Then, footsteps, quick, light, moving away from me, deeper into the warehouse. My pulse surged, adrenaline flooding my system. This wasn't part of the job description. I was supposed to report trespassers, call the police, wait for backup. But the phone was back in the office, and a reckless part of me, the part that had been bored out of my skull for hours, was curious. Maybe it was a stray cat, a rat, something mundane that had slipped inside. I moved toward the sound, my flashlight beam darting nervously from shelf to shelf, my other hand gripping the heavy mag light like a club. I rounded a corner, my beam catching a flash of movement. A figure, unmistakably human, ducking behind a stack of crates. My stomach dropped, "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking with a mix of fear and bravado. "I can see you. Come out now." More movement, shadows shifting, and then, to my horror, two more figures emerged from behind other hiding spots. Three men dressed in dark clothes, their faces obscured by ski masks. Time slowed, the world narrowing to the glint of a gun barrel in one man's hand, the shout that tore from another's throat. My instinct screamed, and I ran. Panic took over, raw and blinding, propelling me back the way I'd come. My flashlight beam bounced wildly, throwing disorienting shadows across the shelves. A loud crack split the air, a gunshot. They were shooting at me. My breath came in ragged gasps, my legs pumping as I dove behind a shelf, crates shielding me from view. Splinters stung my arm where a bullet had grazed a nearby box. The sharp scent of shattered wood mixing with my fear. This couldn't be happening. This was supposed to be an easy job, a way to pay the bills, not a fight for my life. I crouched low, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The men's voices carried through the warehouse, low and tense, as they spread out, searching for me. "He's here somewhere." One growled, "Find him." I needed to get to the office, to the phone, to call for help, but the office was on the other side of the warehouse, and they were between me and it. My mind raced, every shadow a threat, every creak a footstep. I wasn't trained for this. I was security guard, not a soldier, not a hero, but I had to move, had to do something. Moving as quietly as I could, I crept along the row of shelves, my flashlight off now, relying on the dim emergency lights to guide me. Every noise, my own breathing, the scuff of my boots, made me flinch, certain they'd hear me. I reached the end of the row and peered around the corner. The main aisle stretched before me, long and exposed, the office door a distant beacon at the far end. It was my only chance. If I could make it there, lock myself in, I could call the police, wait for help. I took a deep breath, my muscles tensing, ready to run. Just as I prepared to bolt, a hand clamped down on my shoulder, hard and unyielding. I spun around, my fist already swinging, driven by pure instinct. It connected with something solid, a jaw, a cheek, and I heard a grunt of pain. Not wait to see who I'd hit. I sprinted down the aisle, my flashlight forgotten, my arms pumping. Shouts erupted behind me, angry and urgent. A bullet whizzed past my ear. So close I felt the air shift, another slamming into a crate inches from my head, sending splinters flying. My lungs burned, my vision tunneling as I focused on the office door, now tantalizingly close. I reached it, practically falling inside, and slammed the door shut, my trembling hands fumbling with the lock. The bolt slid home just as someone crashed into the other side, the impact rattling the frame. "Open up!" a gruff voice bellowed, thick with rage. "Open this damn door or we'll blow it open." I scrambled for the phone on the desk, punching in 911 with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. "Please," I gasped as the operator answered, her voice calm and professional, a lifeline in the chaos. "I need help. There are armed men in the warehouse. They're trying to kill me." "Stay calm, sir," she said, her tone steady. "Help is on the way. Can you tell me your location?" I rattled off the warehouse address, my eyes fixed on the door as the pounding grew more frantic. They were beginning to splinter under the assault. The operator urged me to stay hidden, to keep quiet. But as I huddled under the desk, the monitors flickering above me, I wondered if help would arrive in time. The men outside were arguing now, their voices tense and sharp. "We don't have time for this," one hissed, his words barely audible through the door. "The cops will be here any minute. We need to get what we came for and go." Not without taking care of him first. Another snapped, his tone cold and final. "He's seen us. We can't leave witnesses." A witness, that's all I was to them. An inconvenience, a loose end to be tied up with a bullet. The reality hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing my breath. These men would kill me if they got the chance. No hesitation, no mercy. The door frame cracked. With groaning, one more hit away from giving way. I scanned the office desperately, looking for anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes landed on a fire extinguisher mounted in the corner, its red canister gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The door burst open just as I lunged for it. Two men rushing in, guns raised, their masked faces twisted with determination. Without thinking, I squeezed the extinguisher's handle, spraying them with a cloud of white foam. They staggered back, coughing and cursing, momentarily blinded, their guns waving wildly. I didn't hesitate. I swung the extinguisher, the heavy canister connecting solidly with one man's head. He went down hard, his gun clattering across the floor. The other was wiping his eyes, trying to clear his vision, his gun still in hand. I swung again, my arms aching with the effort, and caught him across the temple. He crumpled, a groan escaping his lips as he hit the ground. For a moment, I stood there, chest heaving, the extinguisher still clutched in my hands, unable to believe what I'd just done. Then I heard them, sirens, faint but growing louder, a beautiful sound cutting through chaos. The cavalry had arrived. I dropped the extinguisher, my legs shaking, and sank to the floor, my back against the desk. The next few minutes were a blur. Police swarming the warehouse, their radios crackling, their flashlights sweeping the room. I was ushered outside, wrapped in a shock blanket that smelled faintly of smoke, and questioned extensively, my voice hoarse as I recounted the night's events. It turned out the men were part of a sophisticated theft ring, targeting the warehouse for high-value electronics stored in a secure section I hadn't even known about. The police found two of them in the office, dazed and handcuffed. The third apprehended trying to flee through a back exit. As the adrenaline wore off, the reality of what happened sank in, heavy and cold. I had nearly died, fought for my life in a place I thought would be dull and safe. I quit the security job the next day, no explanation needed. No amount of money was worth going through that again. The experience changed me, carved itself into my bones. I realized how unprepared I'd been, how naive, assuming danger wouldn't find me in a job so mundane. I started taking self-defense classes, learning how to move, how to strike, how to survive. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, always checking exits, scanning faces, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Sometimes, I still have nightmares, gunshots ringing in my ears, the weight of the fire extinguisher in my hands, the masked faces looming in the dark. But mostly, I remember the moment I chose to fight back, to refuse to be a victim. That night in the warehouse taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Life can turn on a dime, danger lurking in the most unexpected places. When it comes, you have a choice, succumb to fear, or find a strength you didn't know you had. I chose to be strong, to fight, because you never know when you'll have to battle for your life in the middle of the night, in a place you thought was safe. The moment I saw the van, I knew something was wrong. It was parked so close to my car in the bustling mall parking lot that I couldn't even see my driver's side door. Its hulking frame, an anomaly amidst the usual Saturday afternoon chaos. My heart quickened, a dull thud in my chest. As I approached, my arms weighed down by shopping bags filled with clothes and trinkets. I'd spent the last 2 hours wandering the mall, indulging in retail therapy after a grueling work week. The promise of a cozy evening in my apartment, maybe with a glass of wine and a good book, keeping me going. But now, standing a few yards from my car, that promise flickered, dimmed by a growing sense of unease. The van was old, its once white paint now a dingy gray, speckled with rust spots that looked like wounds in the fading daylight. The windows were tinted so dark they were nearly opaque, offering no glimpse of what or who might be inside. It was the kind of vehicle that made any woman walking alone instinctively quicken her pace, her senses sharpening. I glanced around, hoping to catch the eye of a security guard or another shopper, but the lot was a flurry of distracted activity. A young couple laughed as they loaded bags into their SUV, their voices bright and carefree. A harried mother wrestled two squabbling children into a minivan, her face etched with exhaustion. No one noticed a lone woman frozen in the middle of the lot, her breath catching in her throat. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and began walking toward my car. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the van's driver had just parked poorly, oblivious to the anxiety their vehicle was causing, already back in the mall buying pretzels or browsing electronics. I clung to that thought, forcing my feet to move, my keys clutched tightly in my free hand. The jagged edge of my house key protruded between my knuckles, a makeshift weapon I'd learned about in a self-defense class years ago, half forgotten until this moment. The bag swung heavily against my legs, their weight grounded me as I drew closer to my car, the van's looming presence growing more oppressive with each step. As I reached the rear of my car, a soft scraping sound stopped me cold, barely audible over the ambient noise of the parking lot. Car engines, distant laughter, the squeak of shopping cart wheels. It came from behind the van, sharp and deliberate, like metal on metal. My breath hitched, my eyes darting to the narrow gap between the van and my car. A shadow moved, low and quick, hidden by the vehicle's bulk. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to sprint back to the safety of the crowded mall. But a paralyzing mix of fear and curiosity rooted me to the spot. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it could be heard across the lot, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I took a step closer, then another, my grip tightening on my keys, the shopping bag swaying. As I rounded the corner of the van, time seemed to slow, the world sharpening into painful clarity. A man crouched by my driver's side door, dressed all in black, his movements precise and practiced. In his hand was a slim gem, the tool sliding between the window and the door frame with a soft scrape. He was breaking into my car. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world stood still. I saw the surprise in his gaze, quickly replaced by a hard, predatory determination. He straightened, towering over me, his face hidden behind a dark bandana that revealed only his eyes, cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Give me your purse," he growled, his voice low and menacing, cutting to the haze of my shock. I stumbled backward, my mind racing, the shopping bag slipping slightly in my sweaty grip. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not in broad daylight, not in a busy parking lot filled with people. But it was happening, and I had to act fast. "Help!" I screamed, my voice sounding foreign, high and desperate in my ears. "Someone help me!" The man lunged, his hand reaching for my arm, his fingers brushing my sleeve. I swung my shopping bags wildly, the heavy packages, stuffed with a new pair of boots, a hardcover novel, and a bottle of perfume, connecting with his head. He grunted, a sharp sound of pain and surprise, his bandana shifting slightly as he staggered back. Seizing the moment, I ran, my legs feeling like lead, my lungs burning with effort. The parking lot stretched out before me, an endless expanse of asphalt and cars, the mall entrance a distant beacon of safety. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding, heavy and relentless, gaining ground with every stride. "Someone, please." I yelled again, my voice cracking, raw with desperation. Ahead, a group of people emerged from the mall, their silhouettes framed against the glass doors. An elderly couple turned at my cries, their eyes widening as they took in the scene. A woman sprinting, bags swinging, pursued by a masked man. The old man fumbled for his phone, his wrinkled hands trembling as he dialed, his wife clutching his arm. Knowing help was coming gave me a burst of energy, my feet barely touching the ground as I pushed harder, the mall entrance growing closer but still so far. Suddenly, a hand grasped the back of my jacket, yanking me backward with brutal force. I lost my balance, tumbling to the ground, the rough asphalt scraping my palms and knees as I hit the pavement. The shopping bags scattered, their contents spilling out, a scarf, a box of earrings, the novel splayed open. My attacker loomed over me, his shadow swallowing the fading sunlight, his hand reaching for my purse still slung across my shoulder. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me, time slowing again, every detail crystal clear. I saw the desperation in his eyes, the tremor in his hands, the growing crowd of onlookers, some frozen, others rushing forward. And I saw my chance. As he bent down to grab my purse, I kicked out with all my strength, my foot connecting solidly with his knee. A sickening pop echoed, followed by his howl of pain as he stumbled backward, clutching his injured leg. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging, my scraped palm stinging as I grabbed with the fallen bags, still heavy with the boots. I swung it like a flail, the bag arcing through the air and slamming into the side of his head. He sprawled onto the asphalt, his bandana slipping to reveal a young face, maybe mid-20s, contorted with pain and fear, nothing like the menacing figure he'd been moments ago. A small crowd had gathered now, their voices a chaotic mix of shock and anger. Two burly men rushed forward, pinning the man to the ground as he groaned, his hands raised in surrender. In the distance, police sirens wailed, growing closer, their red and blue lights flashing through the dusk. My legs gave out, and I sank to the ground, my body shaking, an older woman kneeling beside me, her arm warm and comforting around my shoulders. "You're safe now, dear," she murmured, her voice soft and steady. "You were so brave." Brave? In the moment, it hadn't felt like bravery, just raw, animal survival, a refusal to let the stranger take everything from me. The police arrived, their presence bringing order to the chaos, their radios crackling as they cordoned off the area. I gave my statement in a daze, my voice trembling as I described the van, the man, the chase. An EMT cleaned the scrapes on my hands and knees, the antiseptic stinging but grounding, a reminder that I was alive, intact. The van was towed away as evidence, its dark windows still impenetrable, and my scattered belongings were gathered by a kind officer who handed them back with a sympathetic smile. As the crowd dispersed and the adrenaline faded, I was left standing alone by my car, the lot now quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. My shopping bags lay in a heap, their contents a trivial reminder of the carefree afternoon I planned. I unlocked my car with shaking hands and slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of leather and air freshener oddly comforting. For a long moment, I just sat there, my forehead resting on the steering wheel, tears I'd held back finally spilling over, a flood of fear, relief, and lingering adrenaline. When the tears subsided, I took a shuddering breath and started the car. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rear-view mirror. The woman staring back was almost unrecognizable, eyes wide and alert, jaw set with determination I hadn't known I possessed. She looked like a survivor. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the afternoon on a loop, the scraping sound, the man's cold eyes, the moment I fought back. By the time I walked through my apartment door, I felt like I'd aged years in just a few hours. I locked the door behind me, checking it twice, then 3 times, the click of the bolt a small reassurance. Moving through my apartment, I turned on every light, the warm glow banishing the shadows. I checked every closet, every corner, only relaxing when I was certain I was alone. Sinking onto my couch, I reached for my phone, ignoring the dozens of missed calls and messages. News traveled fast. Instead, I dialed my mom's number. "Hey, Mom," I said when she answered, my voice cracking, raw with emotion. "Something happened today. I'm okay, but I just really need to talk." As I recounted the story, her comforting voice washing over me, I felt something shift inside. The fear was still there, a tight knot in my stomach that I knew would linger for weeks, maybe months. But alongside it was something new, a strength I hadn't known I had, a resilience forged in the heat of facing my worst fears and coming out the other side. I knew the next time I walked through a parking lot, I'd be more vigilant, my keys always at the ready, my senses attuned to every sound, every shadow. The world had shown me its darker side today, but it had also revealed my capacity to fight back, to survive. As I hung up and curled up on the couch, exhaustion overtaking me, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let this define me or shrink my world. Instead, I'd use it as a reminder of my own power. Tomorrow, I'd sign up for those Krav Maga classes I'd been considering, invest in a better security system for my apartment, and live my life, not in fear, but with a fierce appreciation for my own capability. The woman who'd walked into that parking lot that morning was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who looked danger in the eye and refused to back down. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized I was proud of her, of me. The moment I stepped onto that Greyhound bus, a chill of unease settled over me, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the driver's lingering stare, his eyes holding mine a beat too long as he checked my ticket, or the way the man in the back watched my every move, his gaze sharp and unyielding. My gut screamed at me to turn around, to get off and find another way, but I didn't listen. That decision nearly cost me everything. It was supposed to be a simple trip, 26 hours from Seattle to Los Angeles, a straight shot down the coast. I'd done it before, back in college when plane tickets were a luxury I couldn't afford. The bus a grimy but reliable escape. This time was different, though. This time I was running. I'd left Seattle in a hurry. My apartment a mess of half-packed boxes, clothes stuffed into a duffel bag. The first ticket out of town booked with shaking hands. The less said about why, the better. Just know I'd made mistakes. Crossed people who didn't forgive easily. People who'd made it clear I'd pay if I stayed. Los Angeles was a sprawling maze, a place to lose myself, to disappear until the heat died down. Or so I hoped. The bus was half empty when I boarded at the Seattle station, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and vinyl seats. It was that peculiar mix of passengers you only find on long-distance buses in the dead of night. An elderly woman clutching a worn leather purse, her knuckles white. A couple of college kids with oversized headphones, their faces lit by phone screens. And him, the man in the back. I noticed him immediately, though I tried not to stare as I made my way down the aisle. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with a face weathered by hard living, deep lines etched around his mouth, a jaw dusted with gray stubble. But it was his eyes that got me, cold and calculating, constantly moving, locking onto me as I settled into a seat a few rows ahead. I told myself I was being paranoid, my nerves frayed from too many sleepless nights and true crime binges. He was just another traveler, rough around the edges but harmless. Still, I couldn't shake the weight of his gaze, like a finger tracing the back of my neck. The first few hours passed uneventfully, the hum of the engine and the rhythmic sway of the bus lulling most passengers into a restless sleep. I tried to rest, my head against a cool window, the Pacific Northwest blurring past in a smear of dark trees and distant lights. But every time I dozed off, I'd jerk awake, certain I could feel those eyes on me. Each glance back confirmed it. The man was still awake, still watching, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I pulled my jacket tighter, my duffel bag hugged against my chest, and tried to focus on the road ahead, on the new life waiting in L.A. We stopped at a small town in Oregon for a break, the kind of place with a single gas station and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. I stretched my legs, the cool night air relief after the stuffy bus, and joined the line for the bathroom. As I waited, I overheard the driver talking to another passenger, their voices low but urgent. "Yeah, they still haven't caught him," the driver said, glancing around. "Police say he could be anywhere by now. Scary stuff." The other man nodded, his face grim. "You think he might try to skip state?" The driver shrugged. "Who knows? But I'll tell you one thing. I'm keeping my eyes peeled. You never know who might be on your bus." A chill ran down my spine, my mind racing to piece together their words. Who were they talking about? A fugitive? A killer? I didn't know. But combined with the man's unsettling presence, It was enough to tighten the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Back on the bus, I tried to distract myself with music, but my phone had no signal. We were in the middle of nowhere, nothing but endless forest and mountains stretching out under a starless sky. As night deepened, the bus grew quieter, the passengers dozing, the engines hum a soothing lullaby. But I couldn't relax. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured a man creeping up the aisle, his shadow looming over me. Somewhere in Northern California, around 2 a.m., it happened. A loud bang jolted me upright, followed by a sickening lurch as the bus swerved, tires screeching. Screams erupted, passengers thrown against their seats as we skidded to a stop on the shoulder, the bus tilting precariously. My heart pounded, my hands gripping the armrests. "Everyone, stay calm," the driver shouted, his voice strained over the panicked voices. "We've blown a tire. I need to go out and take a look. Please stay in your seats." As he exited, I noticed movement in the back. The man stood, his silhouette stark against the faint glow of the emergency lights, and began making his way down the aisle. His eyes never left me, that cold gaze pinning me in place. My pulse raced, my breath shallow as he drew closer, his steps deliberate. He paused at my row, his presence filling the space, oppressive and suffocating. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice a low growl, rough like gravel. Before I could answer, he slid into the seat next to me, trapping me against the window. Up close, I could see a jagged scar running along his jawline, partially hidden by stubble, the kind of mark that told a story of violence. "Long trip, isn't it?" he said, his tone conversational, as if we weren't stranded in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night. "Where you headed?" "L.A., I muttered, my voice barely steady, my hands clenched around my bag. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, not reaching his eyes. "Running from something?" The question hit like a punch, my body stiffening. How could he know? Was it written on my face? In the way I carry myself? Panic flickered in my chest, but he chuckled, a low, chilling sound. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We've all got our secrets. Some of us are just better at hiding them than others." Outside, the driver's curses carried through the night as he inspected the tire, the damage clearly more than a quick fix. The man leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You know, I couldn't help but notice you when you got on the bus. Pretty young thing like you, traveling alone. It's not safe out there." My skin crawled, the smell of stale cigarette smoke on his breath making my stomach churn. I shifted, trying to put distance between us, but there was nowhere to go. "I'm fine," I said, my voice a whisper, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. His hand landed on my knee, heavy and unwelcome, and I flinched, my body recoiling. "Are you sure about that?" he said, his grip tightening. "Because I think you and I both know you're in trouble. I can see it in your eyes. You're scared, running. But you don't have to be." I tried to pull away, my leg trembling under his touch. "Please," I said, hating the shake in my voice, "I don't want any trouble." His grip tightened further, his voice dropping to a menacing hiss. "Trouble's already found you, sweetheart. Question is, what are you to do about it?" Before I could respond, the bus door opened and the driver climbed back in, his face grim. "Folks, I've got bad news," he announced. "That tire's completely shredded. I've called for a replacement bus, but it's going to be a few hours. We're stuck here for now." A chorus of groans filled the bus, but all I could focus on was a man beside me, his hand still on my knee, his eyes boring into mine. "Looks like we got some time to kill," he said, his voice low, meant only for me. "Why don't you and I take a little walk, get some fresh air?" Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to scream for help, but as I opened my mouth, he leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he whispered. "You see, I know who you are. I know what you did back in Seattle, and I know there are some very angry people looking for you. So, unless you want to make a phone call that'll have them here before that replacement bus arrives, you'll come with me nice and quiet. My blood ran cold, my mind reeling. How did he know? Who was he working for? The people I'd crossed weren't the kind to send a lone stranger. They'd come themselves, or send someone less talkative, more final. But his certainty, the way he spoke my secrets like they were his to wield, paralyzed me. My legs shook as I stood, his grip on my arm firm as he led me to the front of the bus. Just stretching our legs, he said cheerfully to the driver as we passed, his tone so normal it made my skin crawl. Outside, the night was pitch black, the only light from the bus's headlights carving a small island in the darkness. The road stretched empty in both directions, flanked by dense forest, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. He led me away from the bus, into the shadows, his hand like a vice on my arm. "Please," I begged as soon as we were out of earshot, my voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" He spun me around, pushing me against a tree, the rough bark digging into my back. "What do I want?" he snarled, his face inches from mine, his scar stark in the faint light. "I want you to understand the situation you're in. You think you can just run away from your problems? That's not how it works, sweetheart." Tears streamed down my face, hot and unstoppable, as the full horror of my situation sank in. Trapped in the middle of nowhere with a man who knew my secrets, who meant me harm, his intentions unclear but unmistakably dangerous. But as he leaned in, his grip loosening slightly, something snapped inside me. I was tired of running, tired of fear dictating my every move. With all the strength I could muster, I brought my knee up hard, catching him in the groin. He doubled over with a grunt, his hold on me breaking, and I shoved him away, my hands shaking but resolute. Then I ran, sprinting back toward the bus, towards safety, my lungs burning, my feet pounding the dirt. I could hear him behind me, cursing, his heavy footsteps closing in, but the bus loomed ahead, its lights a beacon of hope. "Help!" I screamed as I neared, my voice raw, desperate. "Somebody help me." The driver's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. A woman running, a man in pursuit. He moved to block the bus door just as I reached it, putting himself between me and my pursuer. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice firm, his hand on the radio clipped to his belt. I turned, panting, to see the man slow to a stop, his face twisted with rage, his scar gleaming in the headlights. For a moment, I thought he might charge, might push past the driver and drag me back into the dark. But then we heard it. Sirens, faint but growing closer, cutting through the night. His eyes darted between me and the approaching sound, calculating, furious. Without a word, he turned and melted into the darkness, the forest swallowing him whole. The police arrived minutes later, responding to the driver's call about the broken-down bus. I gave my statement through tears and shudders, recounting the man's words, his threats, the way he'd known my past. They searched the woods but found no trace of him, only my fear lingering in the air. I never made it to L.A. Instead, I went back to Seattle, determined to face my problems head-on, to confront the people I'd wronged and make things right, no matter how hard. It wasn't easy, meetings, apologies, debts repaid in more ways than one, but it was better than running, better than living in fear. Sometimes, when I'm on a long journey, I still scan my fellow passengers, searching for that cold, calculating gaze, half expecting to see him in the crowd. But I'm not the same scared woman I was that night. I'm stronger now, wiser. My mistakes no longer change but lessons. That night on the bus taught me something vital. Sometimes the most dangerous journey isn't the one you take across the country. It's the one that forces you to face your own demons, to stand your ground when every instinct tells you to flee. The forest was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place to clear my head and reconnect with the world beyond screens and deadlines. I've been hiking for years, always chasing the quiet thrill of untouched wilderness. But that day, something felt off from the start. Maybe it was the way the trees seemed to lean in too close, their branches clawing at the sky. or the heavy silence that swallowed every sound except my own uneven breaths. I ignored the unease, chalking it up to exhaustion from a long week at work, and pressed deeper into the woods, unaware that I was walking into a nightmare, one that would test the limits of my courage and leave me questioning what I'd encountered. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I set out, the kind of day where the air smells of damp earth and decaying leaves, the forest floor a patchwork of red and gold. My backpack was light, packed with just the essentials: water, a granola bar, a map, and a compass, since I planned a short loop through a familiar trail in the Cascades. I'd hiked this area before, a network of paths winding through dense pines and rocky outcrops, always well marked and safe. But as the hours passed, the trail markers grew sparse, the path narrowing until it was barely a suggestion through the underbrush. I checked my map, frowning as the landmarks didn't quite match up, the ridge I was expecting nowhere in sight. My compass needle spun lazily, refusing to settle, and a cold, not a worry, tightened in my stomach. I was lost. The forest seemed to shift around me, the trees growing taller, their shadows deeper, the air thicker with an unnameable weight. I tried to retrace my steps, but the path I'd followed had vanished, swallowed by ferns and moss as if it had never existed. My heart beat faster, a steady thrum against my ribs, as I realized how alone I was. No cell signal. No one expected me back until tomorrow. No one to hear if I called for help. I forced myself to stay calm, to think logically. I'd been lost before, hadn't I? A few wrong turns, a bit of backtracking, and I'd be fine. But then I heard it. A voice, faint and distant, carried on the wind like a whisper meant only for me. "Keep going," it said, soft but clear, the words curling through the trees. I froze, my breath catching, my eyes scanning the forest for the source. Nothing, just endless rows of pines, their needles rustling in the breeze, and that oppressive silence pressing in again. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling, sounding small in the vastness of the woods. "Is someone there?" No answer, only the echo of my own words fading into the distance. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the wind or my own frayed nerves. But the voice came again, closer this time, almost at my ear. "You're almost there. Don't stop." My skin prickled, a shiver running down my spine despite the warmth of my jacket. The voice was male, low and smooth, with an eerie calm that made my instinct scream to run. But run where? I was lost, disoriented, the forest a labyrinth with no clear exit. Against my better judgment, I moved in the direction the voice seemed to come from, my boots crunching on the forest floor, each step heavier than the last. The trees parted slightly, revealing a faint trail, not the one I'd been on before, but something older, overgrown, barely visible beneath the moss. It led to a clearing, and as I stepped into it, my breath caught at the sight. The clearing was unnaturally perfect, a near circle of bare earth ringed by towering pines, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sky. In the center stood a single stone, weathered and moss-covered, about the height of my waist, its surface carved with symbols I couldn't decipher, spirals, lines, and shapes that seemed to shift when I looked at them too long. The air here was heavier, almost suffocating, charged with a strange energy that made my hair stand on end. The voice spoke again, now coming from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in my chest. "You found it. Stay." I backed away, my heart pounding, my hands fumbling for the knife in my backpack, a small folding blade I carried for cutting rope or kindling, now feeling woefully inadequate. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking as I spun in place, searching for any sign of movement. "What do you want?" The voice didn't answer, but a low hum began to rise, vibrating through the ground, the stone in the center pulsing faintly, as if alive. I wanted to run, to flee back into the forest, but my legs felt rooted, my body refusing to obey. Then I saw it, a shadow moving between the trees, tall and indistinct, its edges blurring like smoke. It wasn't human, not entirely, its form too fluid, too wrong. Panic surged through me, breaking the spell that held me in place. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches snagging at my clothes and scratching my face. The hum grew louder, a relentless drone that seemed to chase me, the shadow flickering in my peripheral vision, always just out of reach. My lungs burned, my legs aching as I stumbled over roots and rocks, the forest itself seeming to conspire against me. The trees closing in, the path twisting impossibly. The voice returned, no longer gentle but sharp, commanding. "You can't leave. You belong here now." I screamed, a raw, desperate sound that tore from my throat. My knife clutched uselessly in my hand as I ran blindly, driven by pure survival instinct. The shadow was closer now, its presence a cold weight at my back, its form shifting. Sometimes a man, sometimes something else, something ancient and hungry. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare give it a chance to catch me. My foot caught on a root, and I fell hard, the air knocked from my lungs, my knife skittering across the ground. I scrambled to my knees, gasping, my hand scraping the dirt as I searched the blade, my eyes darting to the trees where the shadow loomed, closer than ever. But then light, a faint, golden glow piercing the darkness, coming from deeper in the forest. It wasn't the harsh beam of a flashlight or the flicker of fire, but something softer, warmer, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The voice hissed, a sound of frustration, and the shadow recoiled, its form dissolving into the trees. I didn't question it, didn't hesitate. I grabbed my knife and ran toward the light, my body aching, my mind a whirlwind of fear and hope. The hum faded, the air growing lighter, the forest opening up as the light grew brighter, guiding me like a beacon. I burst out of the trees and found myself on a familiar trail, the one I'd started on hours ago, now bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Dawn? I checked my watch, my hands trembling. It was barely 6 p.m. when I gotten lost, and yet the sky was pink and gold, the first rays of morning sun filtering through the pines. My map and compass were useless, but the trail markers were clear now, leading me back to the trailhead where my car waited untouched, exactly as I'd left it. I collapsed against the hood, my legs giving out, my body shaking with sobs I couldn't control. I was safe, but the terror clung to me, a cold weight in my bones. I drove home in a daze, the forest shrinking in my rearview mirror, but its presence lingered, a shadow in my mind. When I got back to my apartment, I locked the door, checked every window, and sat on my couch, my knife still clutched in my hand, unable to sleep. The voice, the stone, the shadow, they haunted me, their reality undeniable despite my rational mind's protests. I researched the area later, digging through old records and local legends, and found whispers of a place in the Cascades, a clearing where hikers vanished, where strange symbols marked the earth, where something ancient waited for those who strayed too far. I haven't hiked since that day, haven't set foot in a forest, though I miss it. The crunch of leaves, the smell of pine, the quiet that used to feel like home. I'm different now, jumpier, always looking over my shoulder, half expecting to hear that voice again, to see that shadow in the corner of my eye. I keep my knife close, not just for protection, but as a reminder of what I survived, of the strength I found when I thought I had none. I don't know what was in that clearing, whether it was a spirit, a hallucination, or something older, something that doesn't belong in our world. But I know it was real, and I know it's still out there, waiting for the next lost soul to wander too close. That day taught me something I'll never forget. The wilderness isn't always a refuge. Sometimes it's a hunter, and when it calls, you'd better know how to run. The cabin was supposed to be our escape, a romantic weekend retreat nestled deep in the mountains, far from the grind of city life and the weight of our daily routines. Sarah and I have been planning it for weeks, poring over photos of the cozy, cedar-walled hideaway with its stone fireplace and sweeping views of pine-covered peaks. We needed this. Time to reconnect, to laugh, to rediscover the spark that had carried us through 5 years together. But from the moment we arrived, something felt off, a subtle wrongness in the air that I couldn't quite place. By the end of the weekend, our dream getaway had become a nightmare, one that would test our love and our will to survive. The drive up was long, winding through narrow mountain roads that twisted beneath a canopy of evergreens, the late afternoon sun casting dapple shadows across the pavement. Sarah was in high spirits, her laughter filling the car as she fiddled with the radio, settling on a playlist of old folk tunes that matched the rustic vibe we were chasing. I stole glances at her, her auburn hair catching the light, her green eyes bright with excitement, and felt a warmth in my chest. This was why we were doing this. For moments like these, unburdened by work emails or the hum of the city. But as we climbed higher, the signal faded, the music replaced by static, and a faint unease crept into me, like a chill I couldn't shake. We reached the cabin just before dusk, the sky streaked with orange and purple, the air crisp with the scent of pine and wood smoke. The place was as beautiful as the photos promised, a sturdy log structure with a wide porch, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to guard from the outside world. But as I turned off the engine, the silence hit me, heavy and absolute, broken only by the crunch of gravel under our tires. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves, just a stillness that felt almost watchful. Sarah didn't seem to notice, already bounding out of the car with our bags, her voice echoing as she called, "Come on, Matt, let's explore before it gets dark." Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting, the kind of place that begged you to curl up with a blanket and a glass of wine. The living room had a plush leather couch facing the fireplace, a stack of logs ready to burn, and a rustic dining table set with a vase of wildflowers. The kitchen was small but well-equipped, and the bedroom upstairs boasted a king-size bed draped in soft flannel. Sarah was delighted, spinning around the living room like a kid, her laughter easing my lingering unease. "This is perfect," she said, wrapping her arms around me, her warmth grounding me. Just us, no distractions. I love it already. We unpacked, made a quick dinner of pasta and red sauce, and settled on the couch with a bottle of Merlot, the fire crackling as we talked and laughed, the world outside fading away. For a while, it was everything we'd hoped for, intimate, peaceful hours. But as the night deepened, I noticed small things that pricked at my calm. A faint humming sound, barely audible, coming from somewhere in the walls, like an appliance left running. A shadow that seemed to move across the window, though it could have been the firelight playing tricks. And once, when I went to grab more firewood from the porch, I thought I heard a rustle in the trees. Too deliberate to be an animal, though I saw nothing when I peered into the dark. I didn't mention it to Sarah, not want to spoil her joy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't as alone as we thought. After we went to bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, the humming in the walls louder now, a persistent drone that kept sleep at bay. Sarah slept soundly beside me, her breathing soft and steady, but every creak of the cabin made me tense, my eyes darting to the bedroom door. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint click, like a latch being undone, coming from downstairs. My heart jolted, my body going rigid. I listened, straining for more, but the silence that followed was worse, heavy with possibility. Slipping out of bed, I grabbed the flashlight from my bag, its weight reassuring in my hand, and crept downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. The living room was bathed in the dying glow of the fire, shadows dancing across the walls. I checked the front door, locked, the deadbolt firmly in place. The windows were secure, the kitchen empty. I told myself it was nothing, just a cabin settling. But as I turned to head back upstairs, my flashlight beam caught something that made my blood run cold. A small, blinking red light in the corner of the living room, tucked behind a framed painting of a mountain landscape. I moved closer, my pulse pounding, and gently lifted the painting from its hook. Behind it was a tiny camera, no bigger than a quarter, its lens glinting in the flashlight's beam, the red light pulsing like a heartbeat. My stomach churned, a mix of shock and violation washing over me. Someone was watching us. I scanned the room, my beam darting to every corner, and found two more, one above the fireplace, another hidden in a bookshelf, their lenses trained on the couch where we'd spent the evening. My mind raced. Who had put these here? The cabin's owner? A previous guest? Someone else entirely? I woke Sarah, my voice urgent but low, not wanting to alert whoever might be listening. "Sarah, you need to see this," I whispered, leading her downstairs. Her eyes widened as I showed her the cameras, her face paling in the dim light. "What the hell is this, Matt?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fear and anger. "Who's doing this?" I didn't have answers, only a growing dread that we were in danger, that this wasn't just a prank or a creepy landlord's fetish. The cameras felt purposeful, part of something bigger, something sinister. We searched the rest of the cabin, our movements frantic but quiet, and found more cameras. In the kitchen, the bathroom, even the bedroom, there were red lights like eyes in the dark. Sarah's hand shook as she clutched my arm, her breathing ragged. "We need to leave, Matt. Now." I nodded, my mind already on the car keys, but as I grabbed our bags, a new sound stopped me cold. Engines, low and rumbling, approaching from the road. Headlights swept across the windows. 2 sets, maybe 3, their beams cutting through the night. Whoever was watching us was coming. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to think. The cabin was remote, miles from the nearest town, no cell signal to call for help. Running into the woods was a gamble. We didn't know the terrain, and the darkness would hide our pursuers as easily as it hit us. "The basement," I said, remembering the trapdoor I'd seen in the kitchen, half hidden under a rug. "We can hide there until they're gone." Sarah hesitated, her eyes wide with fear, but nodded, trusting me despite the terror gripping us both. We scrambled to the kitchen, pulling up the rug to reveal the trapdoor, its hinges creaking as I yanked it open. A narrow wooden staircase descended into darkness, the air below cool and musty, smelling of earth and mildew. I handed Sarah the flashlight, my hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system, and we descended, closing the trapdoor behind us. The basement was small, cluttered with old furniture and boxes, a single bulb dangling from the ceiling, its light weak but enough to see by. We crouched behind a stack of crates, our breaths shallow, listening as the engines cut off and heavy footsteps approached the cabin. Voices followed, male, low and urgent, their words muffled to the floorboards but laced authority. "They're still here," one said, his tone cold. "Cars out front. Check every room." Doors slammed. Furniture scraped. Glass shattered as they tore through the cabin above us. Sarah gripped my hand, her fingers icy, her eyes locked on mine, a silent plea for reassurance I wasn't sure I could give. I scanned the basement, looking for anything we could use to defend ourselves, and spotted a rusty crowbar leaning against the wall. I grabbed it, its weight solid in my hands, a small comfort against the chaos unfolding upstairs. The trapdoor rattled, a heavy boot testing its strength, and my heart stopped. "Down here," a voice called, followed by the screech of hinges as the door was wrenched open. Light flooded the staircase, shadows moving as 2 men descended, their boots loud against the wood. I pulled Sarah closer, my grip on the crowbar tightening, my body coiled to act. The men were dressed in dark tactical gear, their faces obscured by balaclavas, handguns drawn, their movement precise, professional. These weren't amateurs. They were hunters, and we were their prey. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. As the first man reached the bottom step, I lunged, swinging the crowbar with all my strength. It connected with his shoulder, a sickening crunch as he staggered, his gun clattering to the floor. The second man raised his weapon, but Sarah was faster, grabbing a broken chair from the clutter and hurling it at him. It caught him off guard, the wood splintering against his chest, giving me time to tackle him, my weight driving him to the ground. We struggled, his strength overwhelming, but I managed to wrench the gun from his hand, tossing it across the room. "Run!" I shouted to Sarah, shoving her toward the stairs. She hesitated, her eyes frantic, but obeyed, scrambling up as I grappled with the second man. The first was back on his feet, clutching his shoulder but reaching for a knife at his belt. I kicked out, catching his knee, and bolted after Sarah, the crowbar still in my hand. We burst into the kitchen, the cabin a wreck, furniture overturned, windows smashed, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear. Outside, more voices shouted, flashlight beams sweeping the porch, closing in. We didn't stop, didn't look back. We ran for the woods, the darkness swallowing us as we plunged into trees, branches snapping against our faces, the cold air burning our lungs. The men were close behind, their shouts echoing, their lights cutting through the night. I grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her deeper into forest, our footsteps muffled by pine needles, our only guide the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy. We ran until my legs screamed, until the sound of pursuit faded, until we stumbled into a shallow ravine, collapsing behind a fallen log, our breaths ragged, our bodies trembling. We stayed there, hidden as the night stretched on, the men's voices growing distant, their lights eventually vanishing. Sarah clung to me, her face buried in my chest, her sobs quiet but wrenching. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered, her voice broken. I didn't have an answer, only a burning resolve to keep her safe, to get us out of this alive. We waited until dawn, the sky lightening to a soft gray, before moving, following the ravine until it led to a dirt road. Hours later, we stumbled into a small gas station, the clerk's eyes widening at our disheveled state. Clothes torn, faces scratched, eyes wild with fear. The police were called, their questions relentless but necessary. They found the cabin, the cameras, signs of a struggle, but no trace of the men, their vehicles gone, the trail cold. The cabin's owner, a reclusive man with no criminal record, claimed ignorance, insisting the cameras were for security, though his story didn't add up. The police suspected a targeted attack, possibly linked to a criminal network, but without evidence, the case stalled. Sarah and I were left with more questions than answers. The violation of our privacy, the terror that night, a wound that wouldn't heal. We returned to the city, our lives forever changed. The cabin had been our refuge, a symbol of our love, but it became a reminder of how fragile safety can be. We installed new locks, a security system, but the real change was in us. Sarah's laughter quieter now, my sleep broken by nightmares of flashlights and footsteps. We leaned on each other, our bond stronger for it, but the trust we'd had in the world was gone. I still see those red lights sometimes, in the corners of my mind, and I wonder who was watching what they wanted, and if they're still out there, waiting for another chance. That weekend taught us a brutal lesson. Love can carry you through the darkest moments, but it can't shield you from the dangers lurking just out of sight. We survived together, but the mountains will never feel like an escape again. The pond was our secret spot, a hidden gem tucked away in the woods behind our small town, known only to a few locals and even fewer thrill seekers like us. That night, under a moon so full it seemed to hum with its own light, my friends and I decided to break the monotony of summer with a midnight swim. It was supposed to be a carefree adventure, a memory to laugh about years later, splashing in the cool water, trading stories, maybe stealing a few kisses under the stars. But something was waiting for us in that pond, something that turned our laughter into screams and left us running for our lives. It was past 11 when we piled into Jake's beat-up pickup, the five of us buzzing with the kind of reckless energy that only comes from being young and bored. There was Jake, our unofficial leader, with his easy grin and knack for trouble. Lisa, his girlfriend, whose sharp had kept us all in check. Tom, the quiet one, always sketching his notebook but fiercely loyal. Mia, my best friend since grade school, her laughter infectious and her courage unmatched. And me, Alex, the one who always went along, eager for the next story to tell. We've been friends forever, bound by shared summers and small-town secrets, and the pond was our latest obsession, a place to escape the heat and the weight of impending adulthood. The drive was short, the truck bouncing along a dirt road that wound through dense forest, the trees closing in like silent sentinels. We parked in a clearing, the pond just a short walk away, its surface glinting silver in the moonlight. The air was warm, thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers, a faint buzz of cicadas filling the night. We grabbed our towels and a cooler of cheap beer, our voices loud with excitement as we trekked through the woods, flashlights bobbing, our laughter echoing off the trees. "This is going to be epic," Jake said, slinging an arm around Lisa, his grin wide. "Best night of the summer. I'm calling it now." The pond came into view, a perfect oval of still water ringed by tall grasses and ancient willows, their branches trailing into the shallows like fingers. It was beautiful, almost otherworldly in the moonlight, but there was something about it that made my stomach twist, a stillness too perfect, a quiet that felt like it was holding its breath. I brushed it off, blaming the beers we cracked open on the walk, and followed my friends to the water's edge. We stripped down to our swimsuits, tossing clothes on the grass, and waded in, the water cool and silky against our skin, a welcome relief from a humid night. For a while, it was everything we hoped for. We splashed and laughed, Jake dunking Tom, Mia and Lisa racing to the center of the pond, their voices carrying across the water. I floated on my back, staring up at the stars, the moonlight painting the world in shades of silver and shadow. It felt like freedom, like we were untouchable, the five of us against the world. But then Mia screamed, not the playful yelp of someone splashed, but a sharp, terrified cry that cut through the night like a blade. We all froze, our laughter dying, our eyes snapping to her. She was treading water near the center of the pond, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. "Something touched me," she gasped, her voice trembling. It grabbed my leg. Jake laughed, tried to lighten the mood, swimming toward her. "Probably just a fish, Mia. Don't go all jaws on us." But Mia shook her head, her breaths coming fast. "No, it wasn't a fish. It was big, like a hand, Jake. It pulled me." The air shifted, the playful mood evaporating, replaced by a creeping unease. Lisa swam to Mia, wrapping an arm around her, while Tom and I exchanged a glance, his usual calm replaced by a flicker of worry. "Let's get back to shore," I said, my voice steady and I felt, already moving toward the shallows. But as we started to swim, Tom yelped, his body jerking in the water. "What the hell?" he shouted, kicking hard. "Something's got me, too." His voice was tight with fear, his arms flailing as he fought to stay afloat. Panic took hold, raw and electric. As we all scrambled for the shore, the water suddenly feeling alive, predatory. I felt it then, a brush against my ankle, cold and deliberate, like fingers wrapping around my skin before letting go. My heart pounded. A scream caught in my throat as I pushed harder, my arms burning with effort. Lisa was screaming now, her voice high and frantic, swearing something had yanked her hair. Jake was shouting for us to move, his usual bravado gone, replaced by a fear I'd never seen in him. We reached the shallows, stumbling onto the grassy bank, our breaths ragged, our bodies trembling from cold and terror. I turned back to the pond, my flashlight shaking in my hand, its beam cutting across the water. The surface was calm again, mirror-like, but ripples were spreading from the center, small at first but growing, as if something large was moving beneath. "What was that?" Lisa whispered, clutching Jake's arm, her swimsuit dripping, her eyes fixed on the water. No one answered, but we all felt it. A presence, watching, waiting. "Let's get out of here," Tom said, his voice low, already grabbing his towel. We nodded, moving to gather our things, but Mia froze, pointing at the pond, her face ashen. "Look," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I followed her gaze, my flashlight beam catching something in the water, a shape, indistinct but massive, gliding just below the surface. It was long, serpentine, its movements fluid and wrong, unlike any fish or animal I'd ever seen. My stomach lurched, a primal fear gripping me, urging me to run. We didn't wait to see more. We grabbed our clothes, abandoning the cooler, and sprinted for the trail, our flashlights bouncing, our bare feet pounding the dirt. The woods felt alive now, the trees looming, their shadows twisting in the moonlight, the air thick with a pressure that hadn't been there before. I could hear behind us, a soft splash, then another, closer, as if something had left the water and was following, its movement silent but deliberate. My lungs burned, my legs screaming. But I didn't dare look back, didn't dare give it a chance to catch up. Jake led the way, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark, guiding us back to the clearing where the truck waited. We piled in, slamming the doors. Jake fumbled with the keys as Lisa sobbed in the back seat, Mia clutching my hand so tightly it hurt. "Drive, Jake, just drive," Tom shouted, his voice cracking, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The engine roared to life, and we peeled out, the truck bouncing over the dirt road, the forest blurring past as we sped away. No one spoke for a long time. The only sounds are heavy breathing and the rumble of the engine. My heart was still racing, my mind replaying that shape in the water, the feel of those cold fingers on my ankle. When we finally hit the main road, the lights of town visible in the distance, Lisa broke the silence, her voice small. "What was that thing?" she asked, her eyes red from crying. Jake shook his head, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I don't know," he said, his voice hollow. "But we're never going back there. Ever." We made a pact that night, unspoken but ironclad. No one would talk about what happened. Not outsiders, not even among ourselves. It was too raw, too unreal, like a nightmare we'd all shared. We drove to Jake's house, piling into his basement, wrapping ourselves in blankets, the TV on low to drown out the silence. I didn't sleep, and I could tell from the others' restless movements they didn't either. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow in the corner a reminder of that thing in the pond. In the days that followed, we tried to move on, to pretend it was just a bad night, a trick of the dark and too much beer. But I saw the change in us. Jake's grin was forced now, Lisa's was quieter, Tom's sketches darker, Mia's laughter rare. I stopped swimming. Even at the public pool, the thought of water making my skin crawl. I researched the pond later, digging through old town records and local folklore, and found stories, whispers of a creature in the water, a guardian or a curse, tied to the land long before our town existed. Some called it a spirit, others a monster, but all agreed it was ancient, hungry, and not to be disturbed. We never went back to the pond, never spoke of it again, but it changed us, carved itself into our bones. I still dream of that night sometimes. The moonlight on the water, the ripples spreading, the cold touch of something not human. I wake up gasping, my heart racing, half expecting to hear splashes outside my window. The pond is still out there waiting, its secrets hidden beneath that perfect silver surface. And sometimes when the moon is full, I wonder if it's still watching, still remembering the 5 of us who got away. That night taught me a lesson I'll carry forever. Some places aren't meant for us, no matter how beautiful they seem. There are things in this world, old, patient, and predatory, that we're better off leaving alone. We were lucky to escape, but luck runs out, and I know I'll never tempt that water again. The wilderness survival course was supposed to be a challenge, a way to push ourselves beyond the comfort of our everyday lives and learn skills we'd never need in the city. 8 of us signed up, strangers brought together by a shared craving for adventure, ready to spend a week in a remote Montana backcountry under the guidance of a seasoned instructor. We expected hard work, building shelters, finding food, navigating rugged terrain, but we didn't expect betrayal. We didn't expect our instructor to turn the course into a deadly game, one where survival wasn't just a lesson but a fight for our lives. The group met in a small town at the edge of the wilderness, a dusty outpost where the pavement gave way to endless forests and jagged peaks. I was there with a mix of excitement and nerves, my backpack stuffed with gear I'd barely used before, rope, a multi-tool, a flint for fire starting. My name's Emma, and I'd signed up to prove something to myself, to quiet the voice that said I wasn't tough enough, wasn't capable. The others were a varied crew. Mark, a cocky ex-Marine with a loud laugh. Sarah, a quiet nurse with a steady gaze. Raj, a tech guy looking unplugged. Lila, a free-spirited artist with a knack for storytelling. Tom, a middle-aged accountant seeking a midlife reset. And siblings Claire and Ethan, college students with a competitive streak. Our instructor, Victor, was waiting for us at the trailhead, his presence commanding. A tall, weathered man in his 50s, with a grizzled beard and eyes that seemed to see right through you. Victor's briefing was intense, his voice gravelly as he laid out the rules. "This isn't a camping trip," he said, pacing before us, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Out here, nature doesn't care about your feelings or your plans. You'll learn to survive by doing, by facing the real thing. Follow my lead and you'll make it. Hesitate and you're on your own." His words sent a shiver through me, but I chalked it up to the thrill of the challenge. We were in good hands, I told myself. Victor had decades of experience, a former Special Forces operative turned survival expert. His reputation impeccable. What could go wrong? The first day was grueling but exhilarating. We hiked deep into the forest, the trail climbing steeply through pines and rocky outcrops, the air sharp with the scent of sap and earth. Victor taught us to identify edible plants, to read the terrain for water sources, to build a lean-to from branches and leaves. We worked in pairs. My partner Raj proving quick to learn despite his city background, his jokes easing the tension as we struggled with knots and kindling. By nightfall, we were exhausted, our makeshift camp a cluster of shelters around a small fire, the stars blazing above. Victor sat apart, watching us, his silence heavy but reassuring, like a shepherd guarding his flock. The second day, things changed. Victor woke us before dawn, his voice sharp, his demeanor colder. "You're too comfortable," he snapped, kicking dirt over our fire. "Survival isn't comfort. It's instinct, it's grit. Today, you prove you've got it." He split us into two groups, assigning us a challenge. Navigate to a rendezvous point 10 miles away using only a map and compass, with no food or water beyond what we could find. My group, me, Raj, Sarah, and Tom, set off with a mix of determination and unease, Victor's words echoing in my head. His intensity felt different now, less like tough love and more like a warning. The terrain was brutal, a maze of ravines and dense underbrush, the map's contours barely matching the reality before us. We foraged as we went, Sarah's medical knowledge helping us avoid toxic berries, while Raj's optimism kept our spirits up. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched, not just by Victor, but by something else, something in the shadows of the trees. Twigs snapped behind us, too heavy for a deer, too deliberate for the wind. I glanced at Sarah, her eyes meeting mine, her expression mirroring my unease. "It's probably nothing," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. By late afternoon, we reached the rendezvous point, a clearing marked by a pile of stones. But Victor wasn't there, neither was the other group. We waited, the silence oppressive, the forest seeming to close in around us. Tom checked his watch, his face creased with worry. He said 4 p.m. sharp. "It's almost 5. Where the hell is he?" Raj tried to lighten the mood, suggesting Victor was testing our patience, but the joke fell flat. As dusk crept in, painting the sky in shades of violet and gray, we heard it, a scream, distant but unmistakable, raw with terror. It came from the direction the other group had taken. My heart pounded, adrenaline flooding my system. "That was Lila," Sarah said, her voice shaking. We didn't hesitate. Grabbing our gear and running toward the sound, the forest a blur of green and shadow. The scream came again closer, followed by shouts. Mark's voice, then Claire's, their words indistinct but frantic. We burst into another clearing and froze. The scene before us like something out of a nightmare. Lila was on the ground, clutching her leg, blood seeping through her fingers. Mark and Ethan stood over her, their faces pale, while Claire fumbled with a first aid kit, tears streaming down her face. A crude trap, a spike pit hidden under leaves, had caught Lila's leg, the metal teeth glinting in the fading light. "Where's Victor?" I demanded, dropping to my knees beside Lila, my hands shaking as I helped Sarah assess the wound. Mark's eyes were wild, his voice hoarse. "He did this. He set the damn trap, said it was part of the real test, then took off when Lila went down. He's lost it, Emma. He's not teaching us, he's hunting us." My stomach churned, disbelief warring with the evidence before me. Victor, our guide, our protector, had turned on us? It didn't make sense, but Lila's blood, the fear in Mark's eyes, the empty clearing where Victor should have been, it was all too real. Sarah worked quickly, bandaging Lila's leg, her hands steady despite the chaos. "We need to move," she said, her voice firm. "She can't walk far, but we can't stay here. If Victor's gone rogue, we're sitting ducks." We fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and rope, Mark and Ethan carrying Lila as we retraced our steps, aiming for the trailhead where we'd started. The forest was darker now, the moonlight barely penetrating the canopy. Every rustle a threat, every shadow a potential ambush. My mind raced, replaying Victor's words, his cold stare, the way he'd watched us like prey rather than students. We hadn't gone far when we heard it, a low whistle, sharp and deliberate, coming from the trees to our left. My blood ran cold, my grip tightening on a multi-tool in my hand. Its blade flipped out, a pitiful defense against whatever Victor had become. "Keep moving," Raj whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes darting to the darkness. But the whistle came again, closer, followed by the snap of a branch. Then another, circling us. He was out there, toying with us, his training now a weapon turned against us. Panic threatened to overtake me, but I forced it down, focusing on Lila's labored breathing, on Sarah's quiet strength beside me. "We need a plan," I said, my voice low, as we huddled behind a cluster of boulders. Mark nodded, his marine training kicking in. He's one man, but he knows this terrain better than we do. We can't outrun him. We need to outsmart him. We agreed to split up, not far, just enough to confuse him, using the darkness to our advantage. Sarah and Tom would stay with Lila, hidden in the thicket, while Mark, Raj, Claire, Ethan, and I drew Victor away, setting a trap of our own. We moved quickly, Mark leading us to a narrow ravine where the ground was soft, perfect for a pitfall. We worked in silence, digging with our hands and tools, covering the shallow hole with leaves and branches, baiting it with one of Claire's scarves, its bright red allure in the moonlight. My heart pounded, every sound amplified, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the distant whistle that never stopped, growing closer. "He's coming," Ethan whispered, his face pale, his hands trembling as he gripped a rock, our makeshift weapon. We hid, crouching in the underbrush, our breaths held as Victor's silhouette appeared, moving with a predator's grace, a hunting knife glinting in his hand. He paused at the scarf, his head tilting, his eyes scanning the darkness. For a moment, I thought he'd see through our trap, but then he stepped forward and the ground gave way, his body dropping into the pit with a thud, a curse tearing from his throat. We didn't wait, didn't give him a chance to recover. Mark and Ethan rushed forward, rocks in hand, pinning him as Raj and I bound his wrist with rope, his struggles fierce but futile against our numbers. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage and fear, my multi-tool pressed his throat. Victor's eyes met mine, cold and unrepentant, a twisted smile curling his lips. "You passed the test," he said, his voice low, mocking. "Most don't." My blood boiled, the urge to hurt him overwhelming, but Sarah's hand on my shoulder stopped me. "He's not worth it," she said, her voice steady. "Let's get Lila out of here." We dragged Victor with us, his hands bound, his silence unnerving, as we made our way back to the trailhead, Lila's stretcher slowing our pace but our resolve unbroken. Dawn was breaking when we reached the road, the first rays of sun filtering through the trees, revealing the bruises and cuts we'd earned in the night. A passing ranger spotted us, his radio crackling as he called for help, and soon we were surrounded by paramedics and police. Lila whisked away to a hospital, Victor taken into custody, his calm demeanor chilling even as he was cuffed. The investigation revealed a twisted truth. Victor had been running these courses for years, but this wasn't his first time crossing the line. Former students reported similar tests, though none as deadly, and rumors swirled of others who'd gone missing, their cases unsolved. He claimed it was about teaching resilience, pushing us to our limits, but the traps, the knife, the whistle, they told a different story, one of a man who thrived on control, on fear. Lila survived, her leg scarred but her spirit intact, and we stayed in touch, our shared ordeal a bond stronger than friendship. I'm different now, haunted by that whistle, by the knowledge that safety is an illusion, that even those meant to protect us can become our greatest threat. I still love the wilderness, but I hike armed now, a knife at my belt, my senses sharp, my trust harder to earn. That week taught me a lesson etched in blood and fear. Survival isn't just about skills. It's about knowing who to trust and having the strength to fight when trust is broken. We beat Victor at his own game, but the cost was high, and I'll never walk into the wild the same way again. The lighthouse was supposed to be our haven, a romantic escape from the chaos of our lives, a place where the world couldn't touch us. Jen and I had found it online, a century-old beacon perched on a rocky cliff off the Maine coast, converted into a cozy rental for couples seeking solitude. We were newlyweds, still drunk on love and the promise of forever, desperate for a week of just us, the sea and the stars. But from the moment we arrived, the lighthouse felt less like a refuge and more like a trap, its walls hiding secrets that would turn our dream into a nightmare. By the time we heard the footsteps climbing the spiral stairs, we knew we were fighting for more than our love. We were fighting for our lives. The journey to the lighthouse was an adventure in itself. A bumpy ferry ride across choppy waters, the Atlantic a restless gray under a sky heavy with clouds. Jenna was all smiles, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her hazel eyes bright with excitement as she leaned against the ferry's railing, snapping photos of the horizon. I watched her, my heart swelling, still amazed that she was mine. We'd been through so much to get here, long work hours, family drama, the stress of wedding planning. And this trip was our reward, a chance to breathe, to be. "This is going to be perfect, Ben," she said, her voice warm over the roar of the waves. I believed her, ignoring the unease that prickled my skin as the lighthouse came into view, a stark silhouette against a storm-threatening sky. The caretaker, a grizzled man named Amos with a face scarred by years of salt and wind, met us at the dock. His handshake was firm, his eyes wary, as he handed us the keys and a handwritten list of rules. Keep the lighthouse door locked, don't go into the lantern room after dark, and never leave food outside. "Storm's coming," he warned, his voice rough. "Stay sharp. This place has got its ways." I nodded, chalking his words up to local superstition, but Jenna squeezed my hand, her smile faltering for a moment. We thanked him, watching as he rowed back to the mainland, his small boat swallowed by the waves, leaving us alone with the lighthouse and the endless sea. The lighthouse was beautiful in a rugged way, its whitewashed stone weathered but proud, the red stripe around its middle faded to a soft pink. Inside it was cozy and warm. The ground floor combined living and kitchen area with a wood-burning stove, a worn leather couch, and a small dining table set with mismatched chairs. A spiral staircase wound up to the bedroom, a snug space with a wrought iron bed and a window overlooking the ocean, the waves crashing against the rocks below. Jenna was enchanted, running her fingers over the old nautical charts framed on the walls, her laughter echoing as she explored. "It's like we're in a storybook," she said, wrapping her arms around me, her warmth chasing away the chill of the sea air. We spent the first day settling in, unpacking our bags, cooking a simple dinner of soup and bread, and curling up by the stove with a bottle of wine. The storm Amos had warned about was building, the wind rattling the windows, the waves growing louder, more insistent. But inside, we were safe, cocooned in our own world, talking about everything and nothing. Our dreams for the future, the house we'd buy someday, the kids we'd raise. For a while, it was perfect, the kind of moment you want to bottle and keep forever. But as night fell, the lighthouse began to feel different, its warmth giving way to a creeping unease, like a shadow slipping under the door. It started with small things, a faint creak from the staircase, though neither of us was moving, a cold draft that seemed to come from nowhere despite the stove's heat, and once a low hum, like a voice just out of hearing, vibrating through the walls. I brushed it off, telling myself it was a storm, the old building settling, but Jenna's eyes kept darting to the staircase, her laughter quieter now. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice low, as we sat on the couch, the fire casting flickering shadows. I nodded, my hand finding hers, but I didn't have an answer, only a growing sense that we weren't as alone as we thought. We went to bed early, the storm raging outside, the wind howling like a living thing, the windows rattling in their frames. The bedroom was cold, the sea air seeping through the old stone, and we huddled under blankets, Jenna's body pressed against mine, her breathing uneven. I tried to sleep, but every sound made me tense. The groan of the lighthouse, the crash of waves, the distant moan of the foghorn. Around midnight, I heard it, a single, deliberate footstep on the spiral staircase, heavy and unmistakable, as if someone had taken a cautious step and paused. I sat up, my heart pounding, my eyes fixed on the bedroom door, which we'd left ajar. "Jenna," I whispered, shaking her gently. "Did you hear that?" Her eyes snapped open, wide with fear, her hand gripping mine. "Yes," she breathed, her voice barely audible. We listened, the silence thick, oppressive, broken only by the storm. Then it came again. Another step, slower, closer, the metal stairs creaking under a weight that wasn't ours. My mouth went dry, my mind racing. The lighthouse was locked, the ferry gone, Amos miles away on the mainland. No one could be here. And yet, the footsteps continued, steady now, climbing toward us. Jenna's breath hitched, her fingers digging into my arm. "Ben, what do we do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know, but I couldn't just wait, couldn't let whatever was coming reach us. I slid out of bed, my bare feet cold against the floor, and grabbed the fireplace poker from the bedroom hearth, its iron heavy in my hand. "Stay here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Lock the door behind me." Jenna shook her head, her eyes fierce despite her fear. "No way." We faced us together. Her resolve steadied me, and I nodded, handing her the flashlight from our bag, its beam a small comfort in the dark. We crept to the door, the footsteps louder now, deliberate, only a few steps below. I eased the door open, the poker raised, Jenna's flashlight beam slicing through the gloom of the staircase. The spiral was empty, the metal steps gleaming faintly, but the air felt charged, heavy with a presence we couldn't see. "Who's there?" I called, my voice echoing, sounding braver than I felt. No answer, only another step closer, the creak so loud it vibrated in my chest. Jenna's beam darted downward, catching nothing but shadows, but the footsteps didn't stop, climbing inexorably toward us. Panic clawed at me, but Jenna's hand on my back kept me grounded. "The lantern room," she whispered, her voice urgent. "Amos said not to go there after dark. Maybe there's something up there, something we can use." It was a gamble, but staying here, waiting for whatever was coming, wasn't an option. We moved, Jenna leading with the flashlight, me following with the poker, the footsteps matching our pace, always just out of sight. The staircase spiraled tighter as we climbed, the air growing colder, the storms howled louder, the lighthouse trembling under its assault. The lantern room was at the top, a glass-walled chamber housing the massive, dormant beacon, its lens dark but glinting in the flashlight's beam. The room was freezing, the wind whistling through unseen cracks. to see a churning black expanse beyond the windows. We searched frantically, looking for anything, a weapon, a radio, a way to signal for help. Jenna found a trapdoor on the floor, rusted but unlocked, leading to a narrow maintenance crawl space. "We can hide here," she said, her voice shaking but determined. I nodded, my eyes on the staircase, the footsteps so close now I could almost feel their weight. We squeezed into crawl space, pulling the trapdoor shut, the darkness absolute except for the thin beam of Jenna's flashlight. The space was cramped, smelling of rust and salt, the walls slick with condensation. We huddled together, our breaths shallow, listening as the footsteps reached the lantern room above. They stopped. The silence worsened the sound, a heavy, waiting quiet that pressed against us. Then a new noise, a low, guttural hum, not human, not mechanical, resonating to the lighthouse, vibrating in our bones. Jenna's hand found mine, her grip fierce, her body trembling against me. The hum grew louder, the trapdoor rattling as if something was testing it, searching for us. I clutched the poker, ready to swing if it opened, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But then, a different sound, shattering glass, followed by a rush of wind and the unmistakable crackle of a radio. "Coast Guard, this is Amos." A voice barked, faint but clear, coming from above. Got a distress signal from the lighthouse. "Storm's bad, but we're en route. Hold tight." The hum stopped, the presence above us seeming to retreat, the footsteps fading, descending the stairs, leaving only the storm's roar. We stayed in the crawl space, too terrified to move, until the Coast Guard arrived, their boots loud on the stairs, their voices a lifeline. They found us, pale and shaking, and led us down, the lantern room a wreck, windows smashed, the beacon's lens cracked, papers and tools scattered. Amos was with them, his face grim as he explained he'd received an automated distress signal, a failsafe built into the lighthouse's old system. The Coast Guard searched the island, but found no one else, no sign of whoever or whatever had climbed those stairs. The hum, the footsteps, the shattered glass, they had no explanation, only theories about the storm, faulty wiring, our own fear playing tricks. We left the lighthouse that morning, the ferry ride back to mainland a blur, Jenna's hand never leaving mine. The police took our statements, but their questions fell hollow, their skepticism clear. The lighthouse's history offered clues, tales of keepers who vanished, of strange lights in the fog, of voices carried on the wind, but no answers. Jenna and I returned to our lives, our love stronger for what we'd faced, but forever changed. We don't talk about that night, not really, but I see it in her eyes sometimes, the same fear that wakes me in the dark, the echo of footsteps in my dreams. The lighthouse taught us a truth we'll never shake. Some places hold more than history. They hold something alive, something that watches, waits, and claims those who linger too long. We survive, but the sea keeps its secrets, and I'll never trust its silence again. The open road was my sanctuary, a ribbon of asphalt stretching across the country, promising freedom and new horizons. I'd been driving for weeks, my old sedan packed with just enough to get by. Clothes, a sleeping bag, a cooler of snacks. Chasing the kind of adventure you only find when you leave everything behind. But that night, in a nowhere town off a forgotten highway, my journey took a dark turn. Stranded by a blown tire and a dead phone, I found myself at the mercy of corrupt cops who saw me not as a traveler, but as prey. What started as a routine stop became a fight for survival, one that would test my wits and leave me forever changed. It was late, past midnight, when my tire gave out, the sudden thump and lurch of the car pulling me from the days of long-distance driving. I was somewhere in the Midwest, the highway flanked by endless fields of corn, their stalks swaying ghostly in moonlight. The nearest town, according to a faded sign, was Eldridge, population 1,200, 10 miles back. My phone was dead, its battery drained hours ago, and the charger had mysteriously stopped working. With no spare tire, My fault for not checking before the trip. I had no choice but to limp the car to the shoulder, the rim scraping asphalt, and start walking, my backpack slung over one shoulder, a flashlight in hand. The night was cool, the air heavy with a sweet, earthy scent of crops and dew, the only sound the chirp of crickets and the crunch of my boots on gravel. I walked for what felt like hours, the highway stretching empty in both directions, not a single car passing. My legs ached, my throat dry, but I kept going, driven by the hope of a gas station or a diner, somewhere I could find help. Finally, I saw lights ahead. A cluster of buildings hover around a blinking traffic signal. The faint glow of a neon sign spelling out Eldridge Motel. Relief washed over me, tempered by a nagging unease, a feeling that this town was too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. The motel was open, its office a cramped room lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb, the air thick with cigarette smoke and stale coffee. The clerk, a wiry man with sunken eyes and a stained flannel shirt, barely looked up from his magazine as I explained my situation. "Tow trucks out till morning," he mumbled, scratching his neck. "You can wait here or try the sheriff's station down the road. They might help." His tone was flat, his eyes avoiding mine, and I couldn't shake the sense that he was hiding something. Still, I thanked him, bought a soda from the vending machine, and headed for the sheriff's station, the town's silence pressing against me. The streets empty except for a stray cat darting across the road. The sheriff's station was a squat brick building, its windows dark, except for a single light in the front. I knocked, my flashlight tucked into my backpack, my hands clammy with nerves. The door opened, revealing a deputy, broad-shouldered and stone-faced, his badge glinting under the porch light. "What's the trouble?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes scanning me like I was a suspect, not a stranded traveler. I explained, blown tire, dead phone, car on the highway, and asked if they could call a tow or let me use a phone. He nodded, stepping aside to let me in, but his smile was thin, more predatory than reassuring. "Come on in, son. We'll sort you out." Inside, the station was sparse, a couple of desks cluttered with papers, a coffee pot hissing in the corner, the air stale with sweat and old leather. Another deputy sat at one of the desks, leaner than the first, his fingers tapping a pen, his gaze sharp and unblinking. The first deputy, who introduced himself as Hayes, gestured to a chair. "Sit tight. I'll radio the tow company." But instead of reaching for the radio, he leaned against the desk, crossing his arms, his partner, Cole, according to his badge, watching me with the same unsettling intensity. My stomach twisted, the hairs on my neck standing up. Something was wrong, but I was too far in to back out now. Hayes asked for my ID, his tone casual but edged with authority. I handed it over, my driver's license trembling slightly in my hand, and watched as he studied it, his lips curling into a smirk. "Long way from home, aren't you, Ryan Carter?" he said, tossing the ID to Cole, who caught it without looking. "What brings you to Eldridge?" I explained my road trip, keeping it vague, my voice steady despite the growing knot in my chest. Cole chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "Bad luck, blowing a tire out here. Real bad luck." The way he said it, the way they both looked at me, made it clear this wasn't about luck at all. Before I could respond, Hayes straightened, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. "Here's the deal, Ryan," he said, his voice cold. "You're in a bit of trouble. See, we've had reports of a stolen vehicle matching your car's description, and you wandering into town in the middle of the night. No phone, no story that checks out. Well, that's suspicious. We're going to need to hold you until we sort this out." My heart sank, disbelief warring with fear. "That's my car," I said, my voice rising. "I've got the registration in my bag. I'm not a thief." But Cole was already on his feet, circling me, his hand on his own gun. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he warned, his eyes glinting with malice. Panic surged through me, my mind racing. These weren't cops doing their job. They were predators, using their badges to extort or worse. I'd heard stories of small-town corruption, of travelers shaken down for cash or framed for crimes they didn't commit. But I never thought it had happened to me. "I want a phone call," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, my hands raised to show I wasn't a threat. "You can't just hold me without proof." Hayes laughed, a harsh bark that echoed in the small room. "Proof? Boy, you're an eldritch. We're the proof." They moved fast, Hayes grabbing my arm, Cole wrenching my backpack away, their grip bruising as they shoved me toward a door at the back of the station. It led to a narrow hallway, then a holding cell, a dank, windowless box with a metal bench and a flickering bulb. They pushed me inside, slamming the door, the lock clicking with finality that made my stomach lurch. "Sit tight," Cole said through the bars, his smile cruel. "We'll figure out what to do with you. Maybe a fine, maybe a night in county. Depends on how cooperative you are." Hayes leaned in, his breath sour. "And don't bother yelling. Ain't nobody coming." Alone in the cell, the reality hit me like a punch. I was trapped, no phone, no allies, no way to prove my innocence in a town where the law was the enemy. The cell was cold, the air thick with mildew, the bench hard against my back as I sat, my mind scrambling for a way out. I checked my pockets, emptied my wallet and keys taken with my backpack. The cell door was solid, the lock heavy, but I noticed the hinges, rusted and loose, the screws barely holding. If I could find something to pry with, maybe I could work them free. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. I searched the cell, my hands shaking, and found a small nail, half buried in the concrete floor, its tip bent but sharp. I pried it loose, my fingers raw, and started on the hinges, scraping at the screws, the metal groaning faintly. Every sound made me freeze, expecting Hayes or Cole to burst in, but the station was quiet, the deputies likely back at their desks, confident I was secured. My heart pounded, sweat beating on my forehead despite the chill as I worked, the nail slipping, cutting my palm. But I didn't stop. Freedom was on the other side of that door, and I wasn't going to let these bastards take it from me. It took what felt like hours, the screws loosening one by one, the hinge starting to give. I was on the last screw when I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming down the hall. My breath caught, my hands freezing as I slipped the nail into my pocket, sitting back on the bench, trying to look defeated. Cole appeared, his eyes narrowing as he studied me, a set of keys jangling in his hand. "Boss wants to talk," he said, unlocking the door, his gun drawn, his posture daring me to try something. I stood, my legs shaky, my mind racing. This was my chance, but I had to be smart. He led me back to the main room, where Hayes sat at a desk, my wallet open in front of him, my cash, $200, stacked neatly beside it. "Here's how this works," Hayes said, leaning back, his voice dripping with authority. "You pay a fine, say $500, and we let you walk. Can't pay, we charge you with theft, maybe resisting arrest. You'll do time, and trust me, county ain't kind out-of-towners." My blood boiled, the injustice burning, but I kept my face neutral, my eyes flicking my backpack, tossed in a corner, my car keys visible in the open flap. "I don't have 500, I said, my voice low, playing along, buying time. "But I've got friends who can wire money. Let me make a call and I'll get it to you." Hayes smirked, sharing a look with Cole, who laughed. "Friends, huh? You think we're stupid?" But he nodded to Cole, who grabbed a landline from the desk, holding it out, his gun still trained on me. I took the phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed a fake number, my eyes locked on the backpack, calculating the distance. I needed a distraction, something to shift their focus, even for a second. As the line rang, I stumbled, pretending to trip, my hand knocking over the coffee pot on the desk. It crashed to the floor, hot liquid splashing, Cole cursing as he jumped back, his gun wavering. I didn't hesitate. I lunged for the backpack, grabbing the keys, and bolted for the door, Hayes' shout echoing behind me. Cole fired. The bullet grazed in my shoulder, a sharp burn that made me gasp. But I didn't stop, slamming to the door into night. The cool air hitting my face like a lifeline. I sprinted down the street, my shoulder throbbing, blood soaking my shirt, the deputy's footsteps pounding behind me. The town was a maze of dark alleys and shuttered shops, but I remembered the motel, its neon sign a beacon in the distance. I ducked behind a dumpster, my breath ragged, listening as Hayes and Cole split up, their radios crackling, their voices furious. "He's not getting far," Hayes growled, his flashlight beam sweeping the street. I waited, my heart hammering, until they passed, then ran for the motel. My keys clutched tight, my only thought to get to my car. The motel clerk was still there, his eyes widening as I burst in, bloodied and panting. "Help me!" I gasped, tossing my last $20 on the counter. "I need a ride to my car, 10 miles up the highway. Those cops, they're crooked." He hesitated, his gaze flicking to the door, but something in my desperation must have convinced him. "All right," he muttered, grabbing his keys. "But you didn't get it from me." He drove me in his rusty pickup, the highway stretching dark and empty, my car a lonely shape on the shoulder, the rim bent but drivable. I thanked him, sliding into the driver's seat, my shoulder screaming as I started the engine. Headlights appeared in the distance. Hayes and Cole, their cruisers speeding toward me. I floored it, the car lurching, the damage was grinding but holding. The chase was on, their sirens wailing, my heart in my throat as I pushed the sedan to its limit, weaving through back roads, the fields blurring past. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get out of Eldridge, out of their reach. Dawn was breaking when I crossed the state line, the cruiser long gone, either out of jurisdiction or out of gas. I pulled into a rest stop, my body shaking, my shoulder a mess of pain and blood. A trucker helped me, his first aid kit patching me up enough to keep going, his gruff kindness a stark contrast to the night's horrors. I drove to the nearest city, found a hospital, and reported everything to the state police. They listened, took notes, but their faces were skeptical. Small-town corruption was hard to prove, especially with no evidence but my word and a bullet graze. An investigation was opened, but I knew Hayes and Cole would likely walk, their badges shielding them, at least for now. I didn't stop driving, not for weeks, the road my only constant. The memory of Eldridge await I couldn't shake. I'm different now, more cautious, my trust in authority fractured, my eyes always on the rearview mirror, half expecting those sirens to return. I keep a spare tire now, a charged phone, a knife under the seat, not just for safety, but as a reminder of what I survived. That night taught me a brutal truth. The open road is freedom, but it's also a gamble, and in some towns, the law isn't your friend, it's your hunter. I got away, but I'll never drive through the night the same way again. The house was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where my daughter, Lily, and I could rebuild after the divorce tore our world apart. It was a charming Victorian on the edge of quiet Oregon town, with ivy-covered walls and a wraparound porch that promised lazy summer evenings. We'd left the city behind, trading the noise and memories for a simpler life, a chance to heal. But from the moment we crossed the threshold, the house felt wrong, its warm facade hiding something cold and watchful. By the time the mirror showed us what was hiding, we were already caught in its grip, fighting not just for our home, but for our sanity and our lives. The move was chaotic. Boxes piled high in the living room. Lily's toys scattered across the hardwood floors. She was only 6, her brown curls bouncing as she explored, her laughter a bright spot in the dusty air. I was exhausted, my hands raw from carrying furniture, my heart heavy with the weight of starting over. The realtor had warned us the house was old, built in the 1880s, with character that needed some love. I saw it as a project, something to keep my hands busy and my mind off the past. Lily saw it as an adventure, her imagination turning every creak into a secret, every shadow into a friend. I envied her innocence, her ability to find joy in the unknown. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching us, its high ceilings and narrow hallways too quiet, too still. The first night was restless, the unfamiliar sounds of the house keeping me awake. The groan of pipes, the sigh of settling wood, the faint tap of branches against the windows. Lily slept soundly in her new room, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. But I lay in bed, staring at the ornate plaster ceiling, a chill settling over me despite the warm quilts. Around 2 a.m., I heard it, a soft whisper, like a voice carried on the wind, coming from the hallway. "Mama?" I thought at first, sitting up, my heart skipping. But Lily's door was closed, her breathing steady when I checked. The whisper came again, wordless but insistent, pulling me toward the staircase. I grabbed my phone, its flashlight beam shaky in my hand, and followed the sound, the air growing colder with each step. The hallway led to a door I hadn't noticed before, tucked under the staircase, its paint chipped, its knob tarnished. The whisper seemed to come from behind it, a low hum that vibrated in my chest. I hesitated, my hand on the knob, every instinct screaming to walk away, but curiosity, or something stronger, pulled me forward. The door opened to a narrow staircase descending into darkness, the air musty with the smell of damp earth, and something sharper, like old metal. My flashlight caught cobwebs and dust, but the whisper stopped, the silence heavier than before. I closed the door, my heart pounding, and promised myself I'd explore later, in daylight, when the house didn't feel so alive. The next morning, Lily was up early, her energy infectious as she helped unpack, her chatter filling the house with life. I didn't mention the door or the whispers, not wanting to scare her, but I kept glancing at it as we worked, its presence like a splinter in my mind. By afternoon, we'd made progress, the living room taking shape with our old couch and a new rug. Lily's drawings taped the walls. She found a mirror then, a tall antique piece in the dining room, its frame carved with intricate vines, its glass faintly clouded. "It's like a fairy tale mirror, Mama," she said, twirling in front of it, her reflection blurred but bright. I smiled, but the mirror unsettled me, its surface seeming to ripple when I looked too long, my own reflection distorted, my eyes not quite mine. That night, the whispers returned, louder, more distinct, a chorus of voices weaving through the house. I woke with a start, my phone reading 2:17 a.m., the air thick with that same cold, metallic scent. Lily was awake too, standing in her doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "Mama, the mirror's talking," she whispered, her voice trembling. My stomach dropped, my skin prickling as I took her hand, leading her to the dining room, the moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. The mirror stood silent, but its surface was wrong, swirling like liquid silver, shapes moving within it, indistinct but human-like, their eyes glinting in the dark. "Stay back, Lily," I said, my voice shaking as I stepped closer, my phone's flashlight trained on the mirror. The shapes grew clearer. A woman with hollow eyes, a man with a twisted smile, a child whose face was too pale, too still. They pressed against the glass, their hands leaving smudges, their mouths moving in silent pleas or threats. The whispers surged, a cacophony of voices now, some begging, some angry, all calling my name. "Ellen, join us," they hissed, the sound wrapping around me, pulling me toward the mirror. Lily screamed, clutching my leg, her sobs snapping me out of the trance. I grabbed her, backing away, my heart hammering as the shapes pounded against the glass, the mirror rattling in its frame. We ran to the living room, barricading the dining room door with a chair, my mind racing for a plan. The house was alive now, the walls creaking, the air pulsing with that metallic hum, the whispers echoing from every corner. I remember the door under the staircase, the basement it led to, and a desperate idea formed. "We need to find out what's down there," I told Lily, my voice firm despite my fear, her small hand trembling in mine. "Whatever's in this house, it's connected to that mirror, and maybe the basement has answers." She nodded, her courage bolstering mine, and we grabbed a flashlight and a kitchen knife, its weight a small comfort as we opened the door. The basement was colder than I'd expected, the air thick with dust and that sharp metallic scent, the flashlight beam revealing stone walls and a dirt floor. At the far end was an altar of sorts, a crude stone slab covered in dark stains, surrounded by candles long since burned out. Above it hung another mirror, smaller but identical to the one upstairs, its surface swirling with the same liquid silver, the same shapes moving within. The whispers were deafening here, a chorus of voices chanting, "Stay, stay, stay," their pull almost physical, urging me to step closer. Lily clung to me, her voice small but fierce. "Don't look at it, Mama. It's bad." I tore my eyes away, focusing on the altar, where I found a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. It was a ledger of sorts, written by the house's first owner, a man named Ezekiel Crane, dated 1883. He described the mirrors as portals, built to trap spirits, to harness their power for wealth and longevity. But the spirits fought back, twisting the house, claiming anyone who lived here. The last entry was frantic, scrawled in shaking script. "They're in the mirrors, and they won't let me go." My stomach churned, the truth sinking in. The house wasn't haunted. It was a prison, and we were its latest captives. The shapes in the mirrors surged, their hands breaking through the glass, pale and claw-like, reaching for us. Lily screamed, and I swung the knife, shattering the mirror, the shards exploding outward, the voices shrieking in rage. The air shifted, the hum faltering, but the house shook, the walls groaning as if in pain. "We have to destroy the other one," I said, grabbing Lily and running upstairs, the basement stairs trembling beneath us. The dining room mirror was alive now, the shapes halfway through, their bodies half-formed, their eyes burning with hunger. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a chair and smashed it into mirror, the glass shattering, the voices silenced, the shapes dissolving into nothingness. The house stilled, the air clearing, the cold lifting like a fog. Lily and I collapsed on the floor, sobbing, clinging to each other, the broken glass glinting around us. We didn't sleep, didn't move until dawn, the sunlight streaming through the windows, warm and real. We packed what we could carry, leaving the rest, and drove to a motel, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror, its ivy-covered facade hiding the horror within. I called a priest, a historian, anyone who might know how to cleanse a place, but their answers were vague, their warnings clear. Some houses can't be saved. We never went back. Lily and I found a new place, a small apartment in a bustling city, far from the quiet of that Oregon town. She's still my brave girl, but she doesn't sleep without a light on, and I check the mirrors every night, half expecting to see those shapes again. I researched Ezekiel Crane, found records of missing families, of whispers about the house, but no proof, no closure. The mirrors are gone, but their pull lingers, a shadow in my mind, a reminder that some doors, once open, never fully close. That house taught us a lesson we'll carry forever. Home is supposed to be safe, but some places are built on secrets, and those secrets have a way of claiming you. We escape, but I'll never trust a mirror's reflection again, never believe a house is just a house. Lily and I are stronger for it, our bond unbreakable, but the whispers still haunt my dreams, and I know they're waiting somewhere for the next soul to step inside. The storm was supposed to be just another hurdle, a fierce but fleeting tempest that would pass through our small coastal town and leave us to clean up the debris. My brother, Nate, and I had weathered plenty of nor'easters before, boarding up windows and stocking the pantry, ready to ride out in our family's old beach house. But this storm was different, carrying something darker than wind and rain, a force that turned our safe haven into a battleground and forced us to confront a horror that wasn't human. By the time the eye of the storm passed, we weren't just fighting to survive the weather. We were fighting to escape something ancient, relentless, and hungry. It was early evening when the storm hit. The sky a bruised purple, the wind howling like a living thing as it tore at the shingles of our weathered clapboard house. Nate and I had spent the day preparing, hammering plywood over the windows, filling jugs with water, and dragging the old generator into the garage. The house, perched on a low bluff overlooking the Atlantic, had been in our family for generations. Its creaky floors and salt streaked walls a testament to countless storms endured. Nate, at 22, was the optimist, his sandy hair falling into his eyes as he cracked jokes about the epic surf we'd miss. I, Lucas, 2 years older, was a worrier, double-checking the radio, the batteries, the locks, my stomach tight with a vague unease I couldn't name. The power went out just after 6 p.m., plunging the house into a dim twilight broken only by the flicker of our battery-powered lanterns. Outside, the storm raged, the wind screaming, the waves crashing against the rocks below with a force that shook the foundation. We settled in the living room, the fireplace roaring, a deck of cards on a coffee table. Try and keep things normal. Nate was dealing, his grin wide as he teased me about my poker face. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike, and every gust seemed to carry a sound, a low, guttural hum, barely audible but persistent, weaving through the storm's chaos. "Do you hear that?" I asked, pausing mid-game, my eyes darting to the boarded windows. Nate cocked his head, listening, his grin fading slightly. "Just the wind, man," he said, but his voice lacked conviction, his hand hovering over the cards. The hum grew louder, more distinct, not a sound of nature, but something deliberate, rhythmic, like a chant carried across the sea. I stood, grabbing a lantern, and moved the front door, my heart thudding. "Lucas, chill," Nate called, but I was already turning the deadbolt, cracking the door just enough to peer into the storm. The world outside was a maelstrom of rain and wind, the ocean a churning black void, but something caught my eye, a shape massive and indistinct, moving to the waves, closer to shore than it should have been. It wasn't a ship, not with that fluid, serpentine motion, its surface glinting like wet stone in the flashes of lightning. My breath caught, my grip tightening on the doorframe as the hum surged, now a deep, resonant pulse that vibrated in my chest. "Nate, get over here," I hissed, my voice barely audible over the storm. He joined me, his eyes widening as he followed my gaze, his usual bravado gone. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his hand on my shoulder, steadying us both. We slammed the door, locking it, our lanterns casting jittery shadows across the living room. The hum was inside now, echoing to the walls, the floor, the air itself, a sound that felt alive, invasive. "It's a storm," Nate said, more to himself than me, but his face was pale, his hands clenched. I shook my head, my mind racing. This wasn't just weather, it was something else, something tied to that shape in the water, something that had followed the storm ashore. The house groaned, the boards over the windows rattling, and then we heard it, a heavy, deliberate thud against the front door, like a fist the size of a man. We froze, our breaths shallow, the lanterns flickering as if the light itself was afraid. Another thud, louder, followed by a scraping sound, slow and deliberate, like claws dragging across wood. "Lucas, what do we do?" Nate asked, his voice low, his eyes locked on the door. I didn't know, but I grabbed the fire poker from the hearth, its iron cold in my hand, and gestured for him to follow me to the kitchen, where we'd stored our supplies. "We need to barricade," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Whatever's out there is not getting in." We dragged the heavy oak dining table to the door, piling chairs and boxes against it, our movements frantic but quiet, as if sound might draw the thing closer. The thuds continued, rhythmic now, each one shaking the house, the scraping joined by a low, guttural growl that wasn't animal, wasn't human. The hum was everywhere, a pressure in our skulls, words forming within it, old, unintelligible, but heavy with intent. "It's calling," Nate whispered, his voice trembling, his hand shaking as he helped me secure the barricade. "It wants us to come out." I didn't answer, my focus on the windows, checking the boards, my heart pounding as I realized the storm was easing, the wind dying down, but the hum and the thuds were only growing stronger. The eye of the storm was passing, the air outside unnaturally still, the ocean silent, except for that relentless pulse. We retreated to the living room, the fire our only warmth, the poker in my hand, Nate clutching a kitchen knife, his knuckles white. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice urgent. "If it gets in, we're trapped. We need to make a run for the truck." The truck was in the garage, 100 feet from the house, our only way out to the mainland, but the thought of crossing that open ground, with that thing out there, made my blood run cold. Before I could argue, the front door shuddered, a crack splitting the wood, the barricade buckling under a force that wasn't natural. "Now, Lucas," Nate shouted, grabbing a lantern and bolting for the back door, his fear outweighing his caution. I followed, the poker raised, my legs moving on instinct as we burst into garage, the storm's eerie calm pressing against us. The truck was there, keys in the ignition, our one stroke of luck. We climbed in, Nate behind the wheel, his hand shaking as he turned the key. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. But as we opened the garage door, we saw it, towering, glistening, a mass of writhing limbs and eyes that burned with ancient malice, blocking the path to the road. It wasn't solid, not entirely, its form shifting like oil on water. But its presence was overwhelming, the hum now a deafening roar that drowned out the engine. Nate swore, slamming the truck into reverse, aiming for the backyard, the bluff. Anywhere but here. The creature moved, faster than its size suggested, its limbs, tentacles, claws, something in between, slamming against the truck, rocking it on its chassis. I swung the poker through the open window, the iron connecting with a sickening squelch, the thing recoiling with a scream that wasn't sound but pressure, a force that cracked the windshield. Nate floored it, the truck bouncing over the uneven ground, the bluff dropping away to the rock below, the ocean a black void beyond. "Hold on," he shouted, veering toward the coastal road, the creature pursuing, its hum a command now, urging us to stop, to surrender. We hit the road, tires screeching, the creature's shadow looming in the rearview mirror, its eyes like beacons in the dark. The storm was returning, rain lashing the truck, the wind pushing us toward the cliff's edge, but Nate drove like a man possessed, his focus absolute. I clutched the poker, my shoulder aching from the blow, my mind a whirlwind of fear and defiance. "What is it?" I gasped, my voice lost in the chaos. But Nate didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the road, the town's lights faint in the distance. The creature slowed, its form dissolving into the rain, the hum fading as we put miles between us and the house. We didn't stop until we reached the town, pulling into the police station, our clothes soaked, our bodies trembling, the truck battered but intact. The officers listened, their faces skeptical, but the cracked windshield, the dents in the hood, the terror in our eyes, they couldn't dismiss it entirely. They sent a team to the house, found the door splintered, the barricade shattered, but no sign of the creature, only a slick, iridescent residue on the porch, smelling of salt and decay. We stayed in a motel, the storm raging through the night, the ocean's roar a reminder of what we'd faced. The police called it a freak event, maybe a rogue wave or a hallucination brought on by fear, but Nate and I knew better. We researched later, digging through local legends, finding tales of a sea-born entity, a guardian or a curse, tied to the coast, stirred by storms, hungry for those who lingered too long. The house was abandoned after that, its windows boarded permanently. The bluff eroding, claimed by the sea. We're different now, Nate quieter, his jokes rare, me haunted by that hum, by the eyes that saw too much. We left the coast, moved inland, but the ocean follows us, in dreams, in the sound of rain against the windows. I keep the poker by my bed, not for protection, but as a reminder of what we survived, of the bond that held us together when the world turned against us. That storm taught us a truth we'll never escape. The sea is vast, ancient, and alive, and when it calls, it doesn't let go easily. We got away. But I'll never trust a storm silence again, never believe the shore is safe.